Going live.
We're doing it.
Do it live. Like that. We're live. All right, well, welcome everybody. We're finally, due to some technical difficulties, we're finally up and at 'em. This is my special 1K subscriber stream. We have a great panel for you today. We're still waiting on Brett R. Smith, but we don't need him to start. First off, my co-host, Perch. What's going on, man?
Hey there, glad to be here today. I'm really grateful to be with some really great names. You guys are in for a good time.
Absolutely. All right, next up, Doug Ernst. What's going on, man?
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Congrats,
yeah, that's awesome. You've been on the firing line as of late, right?
Yeah, it was right after the Soulfinder Demons match campaign ended. I thought I was going to ease into the weekend, catch up on some sleep. And then for over 48 hours now, these Captain Marvel people have been freaking out. So
you went viral. Nice.
It's good.
All right. Next up, we got Alterna Comics owner and publisher, Peter Simeti. What's going on, man?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on. Congrats on the 1,000 subscribers.
Thank you very much. It's awesome having you on here. We've never had an actual comic publisher on the channel, so it's a big step up.
Appreciate it. I'm still gonna wait till you have a real one.
Yeah. All right. Next, we got self-published author and YouTuber David Stewart. What's going on, man?
Hey, what's up? You can buy my books on Amazon. Actually, this one's free. I'm like, you can buy this one, and that one's free. Here's one you can buy. They're all around me. Here's one you can buy. Okay.
Fine needle edge. All right. And last but not least, Donald Thump himself. Tim Lim, what's going on, buddy?
So huge, so tremendous. 1,000 subscribers. That's great. That's great. So great. So wonderful. Also my first
Enormous.
show. Really happy to be here.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to get right into it because we're definitely running
You can buy this.
So we're going to do... People on the channel might not know who David Stewart is. He isn't specifically a comic book YouTuber. He's a writer. He does a lot of write streams, but every once in a while you do a comic-related video, and recently you had one called where your thesis was that people complain that the normies have ruined comics, where you think it's the exact opposite. And do you want to explain to the viewers what it is, and we'll start talking about your theory regarding comics.
Sure. So here's a bit of the background. So if you're offended by the term normie, I apologize, but I had to use some terms that would kind of get quickly to the marrow of what I wanted to talk about. Normie just means normal dude, right? Dudes who are not geeks or who aren't really into a particular hobby. And so comic fans tend to be thought of as rather geeky people. They collect a lot of comics. They're very into the medium as a whole. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's this narrative that I've noticed that a lot of comic fans have, that the subversion and destruction of the industry is the result of normies, of normal people being interested in comics, or comics being changed into something which has mainstream appeal. And it's easy to think that because you can look at a Marvel movie that makes $1 billion and think, well, this is the watering down of the core comic whatever into something that normies can consume. But if we look at the medium as a whole, the opposite actually happened. At one point in time, comics were really mainstream, where today, a typical comic sells 5,000 to 20,000 copies from Marvel or DC, which is a lot. I'd like to sell 20,000 copies of a book. That would be great. But this is a major publisher with 80 plus years of history. And when you compare it to the 1980s, where titles were selling 100,000 copies, the unpopular titles and the popular titles were selling close to 1 million every month. That's not 1 million total for the year. That's 750,000. X-Men was selling 750,000 copies every single month. Then it's really clear, just looking at the total, that if you think that normies ruin comics, your ruler's off. Your metric is not correct. So at one point in time, comics were very were very mainstream, and they stopped being mainstream somewhere along the line. They became distilled down into something that is more geeky. And I chose to talk about comics with that because of this great interview with Shooter from I'm trying to remember where he was interviewed, but he was the president of Marvel, and I think he started in like 78, went to about 87 or 88, 9 or 10 years there, and it was a very successful run of the ship. And he looked at just the sales and the way the stories were told. And for him, it was like the stories are not being told well, and you can see that because they're not selling enough copies. So the basic thesis is that if you just look at the evidence, at one point in time, comics were much more mainstream than what they've become over the years. And I don't have all the answers as to why they stopped being mainstream. I think a lot of experts in comics can get into more nitty-gritty details, but I do remember I used to buy comics at the grocery store or at the drugstore. We had a Lucky drugstore, and my mom used to buy me a comic there, and I could go home and read it. And then it stopped being that way. At some point, there were no comics on the shelf, and you had to go to a comic store. And I remember going to a comic store in the 90s, and to buy, I had to. They had those the 6-issue runs, and so you'd go every so often. You could go down there with your bike or get mom to take you, and then you try to buy the comics that were missing. And then I just kind of fell out of the hobby of buying comics at somewhere along the line. So I was probably one of those normies that bought comics, and then somewhere I just wasn't buying comics anymore. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a lot of people's experience.
And nowadays I just buy whatever collections I think are going to be cool, whatever graphic novels. So I don't buy like the individual floppies anymore for the most part. Not that there's been a whole lot that I've cared about reading. I used to buy Spider-Man comics like religiously, and then I stopped liking them, I guess. I don't know how to put it any other way.
So Perch, you're a retailer. Do you know exactly what he's talking about? Do you agree with him? Is he kind of on the right track?
No, sure. I think it's it's a big topic, and we've talked about it before. There's a lot of ins and outs. What happened to the direct market, returnability, and why the numbers are the way they are. It wasn't just people flooding out, but it was distribution. I mean, Peter and I did a stream now, was it a year ago? It's been a long time. Maybe not that long, but feels like a long time.
Feels talking like about years ago.
Years in Twitter land, for sure. But yeah, the psychology of the reader certainly is that way. There was a need, a desire to capture people to the newsstand and bring them in, and that's where a lot of new fans came from. And now it's kind of a war of attrition where it's people going into the direct market. It's just harder to find comics, and if you create friction in that model, the scenario Dave was talking about is exactly what goes on. And I know for a fact that Tim and Peter and Doug are going to have a lot to say on this topic too. So I'll shut up. But that's exactly it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think everybody's looking to minimize risk, but you know what they say, right? No risk, no reward.
So, I mean, Peter, you're actively trying to get comic books back into magazine shelves and in new old markets. Why do you think that the mainstream comics abandoned like newsprint and the drugstores and decided to go just into specialty markets?
I think solely to start catering to the collector's market, and which was strong and existed at first. But as we're seeing over time, the more you keep going back to the well with gimmicks and things like that, the more it diminishes your product. And in this case, comics is a product. It's not a collectible first. It should be about the story first. Collectible issues, they're worth money because something happened in them that matters. So if you just create this false collector's market based on, here's a variant cover, here's a better paper stock, all that kind of stuff, where it says collectible on the cover, which is a big thing in the 90s especially. The more you keep doing that, the more you start exposing yourself to the fact that, this thing isn't as collectible as they say it is, and you start eroding away that consumer confidence and that trust. And once you start kind of doing that, it becomes an issue of, Well, if I'm a customer, if I'm a reader, especially if I'm a collector, which is primarily who they were marketing to, and you go, well, this really isn't a collectible, but they're telling me it is. You start going down the path of thinking, well, why do I even get these to begin with? Because especially when you're a collector, you're not a reader. You're taking it, you're putting the bag and the board, and you're going, hey, this is my kid's college right here. So, and that's the thing too, is that you need people to read these things, so they become popular, they become loved. People talk about them. People say, hey, you got to check out this story. You got to read this. And once you start going down that path, it's pretty tricky to get back from that.
A collector's market needs ingestion. It's a collector's market is powerful, but what Peter is saying is that you had this great ingestion of fans, and then there's a collector's market to capitalize off that. And so if you start cutting off that ingestion, the collector's market just slowly deteriorates. And then the gimmicks and those things came in, but you have to have incoming.
Yep. First and foremost, you have to cater to readers and readership and people to be interested in the product for what it is. And then that collector's market, that after selling, that reseller market, the flippers, they benefit because those readers are getting people excited. That's the core base, and it builds up. But instead, it was the opposite. It was, flipped, because the collectors would be the ones to buy up, multiple copies and all this other kind of stuff. In some cases, even still, you get speculators who'll buy out a bunch of issues, if not the whole thing, at a store, and they sit on them or they flip them or whatever, and that's good. They make a quick buck. But then what happens is nobody in that store got a copy. So a book that starts off really hot,
the readers
goes nowhere because no one knows why the hell it's hot to begin with, other than someone said it is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Now, I can I interject just slightly? So I made a video about this phenomenon with Star Wars. It's called The Long Tail of Star Wars Fandom. Basically, the way that you make money, if you look at a total market, you have what I call the fat end and the narrow end. So the fat end are people who buy lots of a product of a low value, so a movie ticket with Star Wars. And then at the other end, you have collectors, like Star Wars collectors who buy toys. It's the same thing with comics, or it used to be. So you'd have 750,000 people be buying the X-Men comic every so often. Like, oh, that looks like a cool issue. They wouldn't necessarily read every issue in the series. They would just see it at the drugstore and be like, well, that looks like a cool story, and they buy it. And then it filters down all the way to the people who are on the long tail. The problem is if you focus only on the long tail, there's no reason for that long tail to exist. And if you focus only on the fat end, then the long tail goes away and you realize you've lost a lot of your profits. You have to be able to have both. The reason Star Wars was so successful is that it had both. It had billion-dollar movies, and then it had collectors who had $100,000 collections. If you lose a guy who spends if you lose one fan who spends $100,000 on Star Wars, which I know people who have $100,000 Star Wars collections, and I've known people who have their comic collection is in the tens of thousands of dollars too, right? If you lose one of those people, it's like losing a huge portion of that fat end. 100,000 would be like losing 10,000 tickets. It's a big deal. So the problem is focusing only on that long tail. There's no reason for it to exist. You got to have both.
Yeah. So that's when you had your video, I was like, oh, he's talking about, he's not specifically stating, but he's talking about the 90s collector boom. Where, there was some articles in the Wall Street Journal that said, hey, you can send your kids through college if you have rare comic books. So you had speculators came into the market and they started buying up all the rare books, and all of a sudden you have a supply and demand issue. So the comic industry decided to abandon, the drugstore and the grocery store and go into the niche market and started artificially creating rare books. And then after a few years, a Superman 75 that was printed at a 1.5 million, that's not collectible. Everyone has multiple copies.
Yeah, and they're pristine.
Yeah, and everyone's like, well, this isn't even worth anything. I paid $150 and now it's worth $40 because it turns out that the market is completely saturated with it. So all those speculators abandoned it. So all the your drugstores and your grocery stores where you had them on as impulse buys, for 50 cents or, maybe it was $1 at that point. Those kind of all went away. You don't have the niche stores left. They've been constantly pumping up fake rare issues to keep the market up.
variant covers
at the bottom because the stories aren't good. And then, like one of my co-hosts normally for this, his name is Doc. He was an X-Men completionist. You know, he had to have every single issue of X-Men. He wanted a complete run of the entire collection. When X-Men Gold #1 released, they had a 1 in 1,000 variant cover that was $1,000 the day it was released. He's like, I can't keep collecting this.
Yeah, it's too much.
He's
like, if I can't have them all, then why do I want any of them?
Common story, and it's you said you get out, you get rid of the whales, and you do these kinds of schemes, and the myth of these comics will send your kids to college. I mean, you would have a far better investment strategy if you just randomly picked 20 tech stocks and played it out for 10 years than trying to make it off variant covers. I mean, I'm sorry, there's value there, but you're not sending your kids to college on that. You have to. It's an interesting market, but it is definitely eroding, and we're seeing it happen rather fast.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing in like something like Magic the Gathering, or there's a bunch of these little collectors markets. I think the bottom's kind of fallen out of Magic the Gathering. Magic is a game I used to play, but it's a lot of the same reasons. You have people who buy up boxes of a new set because they expect to resell the packs later on. Like they're going to be, if you come across a sealed alpha pack like from the original, it's like tens of thousands of dollars to open that pack and get garbage out of it. But that's not new Magic cards, guys. That's not the way it is. New Magic cards are basically worthless because they will print as many as they can for those collectors in that niche market. It's just how it is.
So it's an interesting issue that basically the management, basically in the big two created because everyone else, then follows suit. So now you have a shrinking market that needs to grow, but they won't let go of the variant covers and the other pricing schemes. So now the prices are just going up, and DC's kind of following suit. Peter, I know you initially, when you started Alterna Comics, you started as basically you were publishing graphic novels, and then you kind of read the tea leaves and you said, well, the graphic novel market's being diminished because they're producing too many. They're producing graphic novels for stories that aren't worth graphic novels at this point. Because
especially the whole point with graphic novels, right, is to keep them evergreen. It's a story that you want to keep in production, you want to keep out there. Something that is supposed to have mass appeal more than a single issue for 100 reasons. So it's longer shelf life, all that kind of stuff. It's sturdier, and instead, largely in comics, it's still the flip side of it. It's still single issues have the way higher distribution and readership as opposed to graphic novels. I know that there's obviously Scholastic and Random House and all these other guys, the big book publishers getting in on graphic novels, where we see a lot of success in those markets, but that's because they've been ingrained in those kinds of markets for such a while. Whereas now we're getting this huge injection right away. We see some success. The comic industry, this is kind of what they always do. It's weird. They see something work just for a little while, and they go, this is the complete way we have to do everything this way. Every single little thing in our company has to be geared towards this one thing that's working for a little bit. And then they just full scale pivot the whole way. It's so strange. Instead of just going, this is a good thing, we got to keep doing more of it, but we'll also keep doing the thing we're doing that's been working out. It's very strange, because even with the graphic novels, it took off. It's a nice thing for an older reader too. It's a higher price point. It's a premium product. It attracts a more adult audience. And at the time, you get Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns and all that stuff. It would have been nice to see the graphic novels kind of stay that way a bit and be outside of the continuity, cater to a reader that has a little more to spend, and then keep the single issues intact the way they were. Keep them all ages, keep them from going into this realm of everything becomes written for the trade. It's a strange industry.
It's not a group of people that have strong business sense. I mean, there's everybody has their own little talents, but a lot of the people who have risen up in the companies and gotten more authority don't have the basic kind of market sense of things you've talked about, stuff David was talking about. Certainly when we were on with Brett last time, there's just some basic business fundamentals. I mean, who's got their MBA helping out with these companies and the strategy? And the reality is nobody. And so and if you talk to people at cons, if I've had many conversations with heads of digital strategy and editors and other people who will say things that are baffling to you. It's just they're coming from a completely creator-driven mindset without any of the how is this going to fly business-wise. And by the way, I think that's why there's some resentment that comes on to Twitter, because now they're suddenly opened up to a bunch of, for lack of a better word, business jockeys who actually know some business, and they resent it. They don't like being told what to do. They know that there's some weakness there, and it creates that. I'm sure that is a bit of what you've experienced, Peter, for sure, in that regard.
Oh, I've experienced stuff I'm not aware.
That was actually something many, many years ago when I was on the old Marvel boards. You would have people that would basically make the points that we're making here, and the moderators would just be like, banned, deleted comment, or they would be like, who the heck are you to basically this is what they're projecting. Who are you to tell us blah, 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 blah. And like you said, there were people like, well, I mean, I do have an MBA. I don't need to be literally in the industry to know basic business fundamentals. Banned, deleted, and that's sort of that's where all these YouTube channels and now people on Twitter, like you said, now we have a network of people that they can't just ban you outright. So they resort to trying to get you kicked off Twitter, to get you kicked off other platforms, to swarm you to the extent that you would actually leave Twitter or block people. And
character assassination, so no one believes what you have to say.
They're losing control of the narrative, and it's driving them crazy.
Yeah.
Well, which often works on Twitter, because people with their MBAs and business and degrees who actually like making money quickly go, I'm not making money talking to these loons, so I'm just gonna move on.
Yeah,
not worth my time.
Absolutely.
So, another interesting aspect I've noticed, and I want to talk to Tim about this one. So you have the comic books markets. The leadership want to grow the market, so they want to appeal to younger readers. It's all about millennials. It's all about YA. It's all about the teenage audiences. But these geniuses are marketing to them the same way that they do 40-year-old men. So I know, Tim, you do a lot of marketing and things like this. Will that ever work? Because I don't see it happening.
No, I don't see it happening either. And one of the things that I'm looking at right now, actually, I've been looking at it for the last year. I think one thing that our circle of friends, I guess, has in common is that ever since 2017, we've been trying to kind of come up with solutions to what we think are pretty common, not common problems, but they're problems that I think can be solved with just an outside, fresh perspective on them. And what I've been looking at as of late is the manga market. I kind of gave up on comics wholesale as of last year. I'll still pick up a few titles every now and then, trade paperbacks for sure. But even then, I'll pick up a trade and it's terrible. And I just get disappointed over and over again. Well, people would be telling me, hey, you should just give up and just watch anime and manga. Now, here's the irony about it. I'm Asian, but I actually don't like anime and I don't like manga. I actually kind of avoided the whole 90s craze. I don't know if it's because like Dragon Ball was slightly after my time. The first episodes kind of debuted after I got into high school, and at that time I had my nose in books and kind of just glossed over the whole thing. So it just wasn't really in my taste, and people just said, well, you just have to give it a shot because I think you'll like it. I think it's filling a niche that you're missing right now in comics. And sure enough, I got Netflix. I just started watching a few anime, and then it was like a rabbit hole, no pun intended. And so what I do is, because I worked in merchandising for so long, anytime I buy something for pleasure, whether that be a book or a toy or whatever it might be, I always ask myself, why is it that I'm getting this? And I encountered this the other day where there was an anime that I watched on Crunchyroll, and I loved it. It had me in stitches. It was like one of the funniest things I'd ever seen. So I was with Matt Weldon at a bookstore last week, and I was like, I'm going to go buy the manga version of this. Why is it that I plopped down $10 for basically a book that I had already seen the anime for? And it dawned on me, because I used to do this. I mean, going back to kind of what we were talking about a few minutes ago, that was brought up. Why is it that I bought basically an adaptation of something that already existed? It's because I wanted to see what the manga had to offer that was different from the anime. I like the anime perfectly fine, but I felt like the manga could kind of expand upon something that was missing. And the quality of the work itself for $10, I mean, you're looking at like 180, 200 pages of entertainment, something that I can sit down and consume, which goes back to kind of what Peter was saying. I'm not buying this book to collect it. It's printed on this manga is printed on newsprint. I'm buying it to read it. I want it on my shelf. I want to keep it in my personal collection. And if need be, I'm going to read it till the spine falls off. So I think there's something to be said there. And going into these bookstores, I mean, if you go to Barnes & Noble, or if you go to, in this case, Kinokuniya, it's all kids. Like, it's all either high school or younger who are buying into manga. So I think that exploring what works in that market in particular is beneficial, because it has nothing to do with the print is dead philosophy. I hate it when people say that. They're like, print is dead. That's the one reason why comic books aren't working. And it's like, well, you know, maybe the physical medium. I see no evidence of that at all. You have some people who are reading digital. That's fine, but they're reading like digital manga.
They're reading it. Is the keyword is they're reading it.
They are correct, and they're consuming it. And I think what it is it boils down to the fundamental of be honest in your storytelling, and tell. And I know this is kind of I see this criticism a lot, and it's justified and it's valid. Some people will say, well, you can't just say demand better books, because that's a non-objective statement. That is a subjective statement. You might not like a particular thing, but someone else might, and that's true. But there is something about the quality of the storytelling of these of anime and manga that I think is different. I think, and I know Doug knows this as well, because we've been working together. I know my co-writer Mark Pellegrini knows it for sure, and I know Bill Williams, who is the writer of Punchline, definitely knows it, and I know Dave, who we have here, because he writes novels, knows it as well. As a writer, depending on the medium you're writing for, it's a whole different set of rules.
Absolutely.
Writing a book is different than writing a comic. Yesterday, I had lunch with Matt and Bill and another friend of ours, Sam. We all work in comics, and we were having this exact discussion. One of the complaints that we had was a lot of people want to transition from writing novels to writing comics, and you can't do it, not in a seamless manner. You have to edge into it very finely, because there is a structure to the comic book form that is suited specifically for comics. There is the ideas of compression and decompression. There's the idea of a page 7 surprise, as Aaron Sparrow likes to say. There's the idea of your big reveals being on even numbered pages. So it is structured to the point where you might not be the best writer ever, but by learning objectively true methods of writing comics, you can actually deliver on a better comic. And if you had editors who knew this, then they'd be able to deliver it as well. So I think that on one hand, I think that looking at print markets where there is a big reader audience for children, I think that that's beneficial. But I think that a lot of kids nowadays, they're just not attracted to it, because one, and I think we all remember this, I know when I'm being pandered to. For example, we always make fun of the Burger King Kids Club, and the reason we make fun of that is because I remember being like 8 years old and going into Burger King, and I see like all these young hip kids where it's like, oh, we got the kid in the wheelchair, we got the kid wearing scuba gear for no reason whatsoever, because kids love snorkels. I remember being 8 years old and being like, it's not that I was precocious at all. It was more like, I didn't know what you're doing. Like, you think I'm a dummy, but I know exactly what you're trying to cater, that you're trying to cater to me, and I'm not buying into it. Whereas I think in a lot of these, in anime and manga, what I like about it is that the storytelling is honest. I don't feel like there's any propaganda being shoved into, down your throat. I was actually laughing last night because I was watching this anime where there's a cross-dresser, but even within the confines of their storytelling, the characters all knew it was weird. Like, it was not one of those things where a cross-dresser shows up and it's like, oh my gosh, like, oh, you're so brave, yay. It was more like, wow, what a weirdo. And there was, all the characters were saying that. There was one character who was like, hey, leave them alone. Like, they're just like that. And that's normal. Like, that's what we would encounter in normal civil discourse. And I think that that's what was refreshing about it. So, long story short, I think that in order to appeal to a younger demographic, they have to look at what is selling currently to younger demographics.
Yeah, because
absolutely,
trying to just slap the DC logo or the DC icon on a cover and say, hey, "See, this is a Raven book for teenagers. You love it."
Yeah, I've noticed that there's been this influx of young adult writers into comics, where it's like, well, they knew how to write a young adult novel. It's like that's the people buying young adult novels are not necessarily the people who want to buy comic books. There's not like it's kind of marketing in reverse, where you're like, well, I really wish this big demographic which buys lots of little novels would buy our comic books. It's like that's not sound marketing.
It's like when they get a celebrity or an athlete author to come in.
Yeah, that's like wanting it's like, hey, we're only selling Barbies to half of the kids. Wouldn't it be great if all the boys bought Barbies? Let's market Barbies to them. It's like,
yep,
it doesn't work that way, guys.
There has to be a general level of interest.
Yeah, there has to be an interest to begin with. And I like manga a lot. I do read manga for a lot of reasons, but one of the things that if you go to Japan and you were to look at the way manga sells there, it's a newsstand thing. It's like what we used to have with comics. They have newsstands on the corner, like they still have them. So you could go down there, you could buy a newspaper, but you could also buy the latest like Shonen Jump thing and buy that and read the stories that are in it, or buy whatever one is popular. It's a popular medium directed, and there's a huge diversity. Just like with novels, there's a huge diversity of manga that's available for people to buy. It's not. This is a question I had for another friend of mine with a comics cast I did last year, I think, which is like, is the monogenre a problem for American comics? Meaning we only really have superheroes. The other stuff is just it's so below the surface. It feels like it's like that's not the case with manga, where there's a huge diversity of what's available.
Oh, that's a good point. And when I lived overseas for a while, off and on in Europe for 2.5 years, and so I spent some time in France. And this was when I was in college, my first year. And this is what shocked me when I was there. And this was back when in the early 2000s. What shocked me is they still have their newsstands too. They're called like tabacs. It was normally where you got your tobacco, but you'd also get your newspapers and stuff. I did not realize that France was such a huge consumer of manga and anime. Now, at the time, they were actually like second in the world outside of Asian countries for consuming anime and manga. I don't know if we've overtaken them or if that's still the case. But one thing that I thought was one thing I think is interesting about it is that I typically, like, my favorite genres, I like slice of life. It's not even it's not superheroes. It's just, hey, this is the manga about someone who works at a McDonald's, and it's like, all right, like, and I used to post this thing on Twitter where I'd say, you're in trouble when I just watched an anime about weightlifting and it was better than like the last Batman comic I read. Like, that's bad, because it's like, it's more engaging. The storytelling of this guy's struggles as he's, I don't know, trying to press a certain number of pounds, when that is more enthralling than a guy who leaps from rooftop to rooftop, you're in trouble. And it has nothing to do with your character. It has to do with the way you're engaging your audience.
Tim, were you the one who you sent me it was actually made for like the medical facility. It was like the cells inside the body. And
yes.
I thought that was amazing. I was like, this is actually more interesting than Marvel Comics.
That's a great story.
It's an anime called Cells at Work,
yep.
And it's basically like Osmosis Jones, if Osmosis Jones was good. So it's about red blood cells and white blood cells, and they're anthropomorphized to humans, and so it basically shows how the body works. And I showed it to my wife, who's a doctor, and she was like, "Yeah, this is all accurate." And I go, "This is like the most engaging anime I've seen, in the recent month or whatever."
It's funny, going back to something David mentioned earlier, but I think it fits into all of this, what you're saying, what Peter's saying. I mean, I was in Japan, I was in Tokyo and Osaka 2 weeks ago. I go there at least 2 or 3 times a year, and I try and work on certain elements and look at what's working there. One thing that I think a lot of people have gotten fundamentally wrong where comics, manga are concerned is digital. I'm curious to get your takes on. So digital is fine, and digital works really well in that region. there's certainly a newsstand and there's certainly print, but there's reasons why digital worked really well for comics and manga and why it's not the same environment here. You have much cheaper access to tech where they can read this. You have a desire from the audience to go ahead and read on a mobile phone or on a small screen. They can consume it that way and they're happy. And it's a commuter area. I mean, you do not have people in cars, you have people on trains. This becomes a pastime. So digital had a lot, and the business model was a lot more friendly for creators to come in and publish to that platform. So in the US, and speaking from direct experience with Marvel and DC, they thought, oh, our digital is just going to grow kind of 2 years behind Marvel, no problem, it's going to work great. But it's a completely different market. It's different thinking, different atmosphere, different way people consume content. It's not going to be one-to-one. And I think, Tim, that was kind of what you were saying and what you're seeing, and David. Digital will work here in the US, absolutely, and it's a different story for books. But comics are a different beast. And once again, you have to have people with business sense who can understand these factors.
Yeah, well, for me, just to give an insight on books, the common, I want to say the common wisdom is that there's no reason to focus at all on physical books if you're writing novels. Well, I'll tell you about 30% of my sales are physical books, not digital books. Now, 30%, you'd be like, 30% is like 10 times higher than what most authors ship if they're in the indie market, simply because they don't ever focus on creating a good physical product. Their physical products are garbage and people don't want to buy them. But like if I hold up a book on like one of my streams or one of my videos, I'm like, hey, you can get this book, you get the ebook for free if you join my mailing list at dvspress.com/list, which is true for this book. By the way, let me give that plug. I see people, they see this cover and then they go buy the paperback. So when they see like a quality cover and then they look at it and people really like the fact that I make my interiors really well designed with custom caps and I do all kinds of cool stuff. If you make a good physical product, people will buy it. The idea that people are not interested at all in physical products, even in the novels market, which is way more digital focused, because a novel, you can easily read it on a mobile screen and you're not losing something. Whereas a comic, I feel like if you're looking at it on a phone, it's like, am I really looking at this? It's a completely different experience in opening up a book and reading it. A manga, maybe a little bit less because the manga format is smaller. But for me, like I saw a lot of physical copies. People still want to buy a book and put it on their shelf.
Well, one of the issues I have reading digital is with I use Comixology, and the way that the screen moves, like you have to swipe and it goes through panels and it'll skip panels and.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes I want to see the whole page, and I want to like zoom in and see some of the details.
Yeah,
the Comixology doesn't let you do that. Yeah,
the way you arrange panels on a page too has an effect on the way that you read it, and that's something that Tim was talking about. You have a big reveal, maybe you have a full page on the right facing page. Someone flips it, whoa, that kind of thing. The way that you arrange panels in a comic, to me, I think, changes the reading experience in a big way. It kind of sucks to lose that when you're looking at panel by, and then also this is a thing I think people touched on it. You have in these modern comics, sometimes you open up a book, you look at it, and there's like 2 pages of like 9 to 12 panels on each page of dialogue, and you're like, what am I looking at? Am I reading a comic? Why is there this arrangement where there's 9 tiny panels of like a character and a bunch of dialogue above them? It's like, am I reading a book or am I reading a comic? What am I doing?
So yeah, that's a pretty interesting point. Maybe the Bendis ease of Bendis-esque type of writing where you have way too much dialogue on the page. So I know, Doug, you've been highly critical of the comic industry. Has it been 10 years now you've been covering?
Yeah, roughly a decade.
So I mean, you saw it definitely got worse at one point. Do you think things are actually getting better now as far as the marketing or the quality, or do you think it's gotten worse or stayed the same?
Well, it goes back. I was actually talking to my wife last night over dinner about this rise of this independent comics movement, and just gaining more and more steam, and you have this network of individuals, of people who actually want to help each other out, and it's like, oh, I learned this on my campaign, how can if somebody else asks me a question, I'm like, yeah, ask me anything you want. I will give you as much information as possible. I want this to get more and more and more efficient. And so what the mainstream industry does at this, if they want to keep investing in failure and failed policies and business practices, it's like it's irrelevant almost at this point in time, because this independent movement just keeps gaining more and more steam. And it's just like, I wish that Dan Didio and guys like that, they would actually listen to guys like us who kind of know what we're talking about, have a little bit of humility. But if they don't want to do that at this point in time, there's just so many good books coming out, and if you want to see where the creative energy really is, it's in independent comics.
Yeah, that's another interesting point. Peter, I was about to throw to you. So, I mean, how many submissions do you get for every comic you can even publish nowadays?
Boy, it's funny you should say that, because as we do this show, I'm also in between segments looking at submissions right now because there's so many. We get about maybe upwards of 150 a month. And it's a lot. It's a lot. And I'd say maybe 2 to 3 of those a month, in a good month, get accepted. So there's a lot of people out there. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that that obviously they may not be ready yet, or it might not be a good fit for Alterna, but people are making comics, and they're making their stories, and they're working on them, and they're getting better and better every time. There's multiple people where over the course of a year they'll send me a revised submission or a different submission for another story, and I can see the improvement. They still might not be there just yet, but they're improving. So indie comics has a really strong future ahead of itself.
Yeah, I think a lot of writers are saying, well, why am I even going through this process of going through Marvel and DC? It doesn't sound like there's a ton of money to be made there anyway, unless you're, Scott Snyder or one of those really elite level people that moves a ton of things. Where I could go through Alterna or other independent publishers, have a little bit more control over the characters, probably have some type of creator-owned rights to everything. If it hits, maybe something happens down the road. And they don't really need to go through the bureaucracy of what's been in place before.
Yeah, I think also something that you have an advantage for. I mean, you have to look at all the advantages of independence. So advantage number 1 is relentless experimentation. Whereas with DC and Marvel, because there's more risk, you have to be more conservative with the way that you play your hand. So that's probably why somebody in the comments mentioned, superheroes are the tentpole of American comics. That wasn't always the case. You actually used to get, horror comics. You had stuff like sort of Conan. You had more variety in the past as well. But outside of that, you can have more experimentation. They have to kind of go with whatever they think that they could just sell some of, because otherwise it's going to be a complete bust. Where if you're an independent, you can have somebody do something completely off the wall. Maybe it's not successful. Maybe it's a huge success. You never know. But the point is that for an independent person, the effort is, it's not zero, but it's lower risk for higher reward. Whereas with Marvel, it's going to be high risk no matter what you do. So that's the first big advantage. The other one is you have the advantage of not having to use traditional printing strategies. So print on demand is something that I'd like to see a lot more with independent comics. The whole point being that for a low risk, you can sell as many comics as you need to sell, rather than I'm going to print 5,000 copies and then maybe I sell them. Maybe I'm going to have a crowdfunding campaign to see if I can get enough people to buy it to then print enough copies. It's kind of working. It's adding extra steps into the publishing process, which for my books is very streamlined. I put out a book. If you buy it, you can buy it. It'll print as many copies as you want. It'll ship to as many people as you want. And if nobody buys it, oh well, not a big deal.
So Tim, I know you've crowdfunded books, and you've also gone through Anarchic Press. Which one do you find more satisfying? Are you considering going maybe the print-on-demand route with some of your own creator-owned works?
It kind of depends. So right now we use a hybrid model. We use the crowdfunding to show interest, and then Antarctic gets to look at our sales, and then they get to make a determination on whether they want to put it in stores or not. It's a win-win situation. I'm happy because it means that I'm at least compensated for the work I've done based on a page rate, so I can get that money up front. And then Antarctic is happy, and hopefully retail stores are happy because then they get to make a little bit of profit off of the sales of books. When it comes to the print on demand, because I know that I think is it Jet Set or Jet City? Amazon has they launched a service where you could essentially have print on demand comics. But what I'm hearing from people is that what I'm hearing from a few people is that the interface is not user friendly, which is why it's still kind of under the radar. Again, I think that's just determinant on how technologically adept you are. So I have no clue. I've not touched on it myself, but if there was an opportunity to do it in a way that's pretty user friendly, that has an interface that people could use, I would not be averse to doing a print on demand comic.
I would love to do one personally, because it's just another opportunity for me to roll the dice. I love randomness.
Yeah, for sure. And the only thing is that I am picky on quality. So Mark Pellegrini, he's dipped into the Amazon market. So he has a book that he put out. We got physical copies of it. It was good, based on, I guess, just in terms of general binding and stuff like that. But when it comes to a certain level of quality, there's a for my books, there's a standard I'd like to meet. And for it, he was happy with it. I thought it could have been a little bit better, but I know that you can actually change those parameters on Amazon. But he and I are, I guess we're not boomers, but you could call us that just because we tend to be Luddite-ish when it comes to our experience with tech. But yeah, if there was a way that you could control the physical parameters of how your comic is published and that you can meet them, I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, maybe it might be that the technology's catching up with the demand, or maybe it'll be something like manga has to lead the way because it's slightly maybe slightly more popular. Like it might get them to invest more into those technologies. I know for my novels I can control a lot of what goes on. Of course, like I design my interiors, so the layout, the way you can't see it because of how bright my lights are, but the fonts, I make them look really good. I make my interiors absolutely top notch, and I feel like my print on demand paperbacks are a higher quality than what I would actually get at a bookstore, and they are. The covers are better, they're slicker, the art looks better, the page quality is better, the paper's not that pulpy garbage. It's really good. So my paperbacks are better quality than what you get at a bookstore, and I'm generally okay with that. But I don't know what it's going to be for comics.
Yeah, comics just hasn't hit it yet. I think the challenge is there's this intangible about a comic, and lots of different ways comics can be published. And it's not, by the way, people point at Peter and newsprint, but it still feels like a comic. The stuff that Alterna has, you hold in your hand. I'm holding one in my hand right now, actually. It feels like a comic. And the problem with the Amazon print on demand service, it's not kind of what Tim said. There's a step down from how it needs to feel. And if it doesn't feel like a comic people are used to, then there's a reluctance by readers to jump on it. And manga doesn't have as much of that problem because of how it's imported and how it's displayed. It doesn't have the same parameters. And hopefully, volume will drive it, and that will be good.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see that change. I've talked about it for a little while now, and I don't know what it's going to be, but I think that there's if it's available, it's a high degree of optionality for a lot of creators, especially smaller creators, and that's where you're going to get a lot of, I think, explosion if there's opportunity. So if somebody is unknown, but they can publish their graphic novel or their comic book and have it print on demand so that their sales, the upper end of their sales are unlimited, bigger guys will be like, well, you're paying too much per comic. It's like, but he wouldn't sell any otherwise. That's the advantage of print on demand, is that this little guy can sell a lot. And if he's selling a huge amount, of course he can go and do a full run and try to sell them that way, especially for like a later issue or something like that. But there's a huge amount of optionality for print on demand that I would like to see grow, because that just means that there's more, there's more variety, there's more opportunity to find what people are going to be really excited about, what that next explosive Black Swan is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought it would be funny if Peter probably already has this in mind, but here in the South we have a lot of Walmarts, and I just thought to myself, if I walked into a Walmart and there was one of those what do they call those things that we used to have, the spinner racks? If there was just an Alterna Comics spinner rack that was in front of every checkout lane, like, you would just
I'd love that. Just the problem is the money involved.
Yeah.
But as far as why DC and Marvel don't do something like that, or even just pay for the promotional placement of getting it by the register, that would be money well spent.
They kind of do something like that, but it's like you said, it's in the weirdest place. It's like in this little bin.
It's after you check out, then you notice stuff over there, and you're like, whatever.
So it's funny.
Yeah, and I used to buy the things from those spinners. I remember that.
Yeah, that's the old way. No, I have an answer to that, actually. There's a reason why Marvel and DC have their comics in the collector's area or in the trading card area and not by the registers, and it's simply they haven't given the chains the confidence that they'll be able to send stock and provide a piece of merchandise that can be easily put there and change the racks and other things. They have to make it easy for these big chains to ingest. They can't, like the comic stores, I think they've gotten lazy in thinking this way, send the Walmart a box and say, fish it out at night while you're stocking and put it on the shelves. Walmart's a bigger player. They have to have an ingestion package for themselves that they can put on the market, and they haven't done that. And Marvel and DC don't today have an interest in doing that because it requires them kind of bend to those requirements.
Yeah, I mean, right now we've been asked by Target to get our comics in there, but the thing is, it's promotional placement, and it costs like $2,000 something a month, and you still split 50-50, and there's returnable. So it's but for a DC or a Marvel, that level, that's nothing. If anything, that's just great advertising. Even if not one copy sells, it's great advertising to get out there. And eventually copies will sell. That's the thing, especially, I've mentioned this before, all those dollar reprints, the True Believers, even Image First and stuff like that. If I was at Diamond making deals to get comics out there, I'd want to get all the dollar books into every single Dollar Tree and establish a deal with them. And this way, it's also not new stuff that has to constantly be kept up with and might be stepping on the toes, potentially, of comic shops. It's all stuff that gets comics in front of people and gets them acclimated to reading and looking at I mean, right now, we got to deal with Sheets, which is, I don't know if anybody knows what Sheets is, but it's Cumberland Farms, it's 7-Eleven, it's that kind of a thing. And we've got ICYMI, which is a reprint series. It's a young adult, all ages reprint series of comics that we've already put out a year or older. And it came out on a Wednesday. And on the back or inside back cover of every single issue is this ad. And it says to go find your local comic shop. And it has the comic shop locator at the bottom. We are not paid to put this ad. This is something we do out of our love of comic shops. And so many people already. They email me, they send me messages. I didn't know I had a comic shop 5 miles away. And I'm going to them now. And that's just us doing something like this. So if every single big publisher did stuff like that to help out within the industry, I don't understand. I don't know. But we're doing our part. We're trying to do as much as we can.
Well,
we appreciate.
I think the collector thing, like if you do a reprint, and I've questioned this too. It's like, why we have billion-dollar Marvel movies? Why aren't people going and buying the comics that like at least a trade paperback or something that was based on? It's like they're not really trying to do that. I think this is going back to like Magic the Gathering. There's always an upset when there's a reprint of an old card because that lowers the value of that previous card. Even though people want to, the point is it's a game and people want to play with those cards. So you should reprint whatever cards are cool to play with during a particular block. But collectors get very upset. It's like, what? They're reprinting this card from Time Spiral? I can't believe that. It's going to destroy the value of my collection. Why are they doing this? I think there's a little bit of that with comics, too. This idea that things have to be rare. What do you think?
And the thing is, the originals will always be rare. That's the funniest part. And I think we see right now the facsimile editions they make. I made a joke about that, saying, hey, if Marvel and DC, you guys need a newsprint printer to get these things looking the way they used to, let me know.
Exactly.
I prefer the aesthetic of the newsprint. Actually, I think it softens the colors. It gives a different look that I actually still appreciate.
Let me see if I got one around.
You know,
here.
And I meant to do a video on this because I actually have books where they like transitioned into that magazine, where it's like I have it's the same artist, like same penciler, everything. It's like I think it's a Spider-Man, like 300 and something Amazing Spider-Man, you know, with Spider-Man versus Venom, and then Venom #1, which came out the next month with the same artists. And they switched over to that magazine paper, and you could see a big changeover in the way that the aesthetics are presented because they hadn't changed the coloring or anything yet. So it's just the same color style, same pencil style, but on the magazine pages, I didn't think it looked quite as good.
So this is on newsprint. This is Feast or Famine #3, with Dave Schwartz on colors and Joe Cooper on pencils. And this is 100%. There's nothing done to it that's different than it would be published on premium paper stock or whatever it is they want to call it. Modern coloring. There isn't, all this craziness of. Yeah. So this is on newsprint, and people say it can't look good on newsprint. Well, it can. You just have to know what you're doing, and that's all it comes down to. Is the fact that. The art can look great still. It can look great. And does that mean that every comic has to be on newsprint? No, absolutely not. But there's absolutely a spot for it. And especially to keep things economical, it doesn't make any sense to completely ignore one of the most, if not the most, widely used paper stock in the world. Everyone says, oh, newsprint's so expensive, so expensive. Well, if that's the case, there would be no more newsprint. Right, every newspaper would be on premium 70-pound glossy matte stock. You have these, they go, you can't reproduce colors and images, and they don't look good on newsprint. Well, even before we did the comics and put them out like that, I want to know how many people do you guys ever see in newspaper? And they do some pretty good reproductions, or even, I use tons of. It's not within arm's reach, but I use tons of grocery store flyers that are on newsprint, and they got some good looking pictures of hamburgers and things like that in there, and it's on newsprint, and they reproduce those just fine. You're telling me they can't do comic art on newsprint? It's strange. It's very strange.
It's a viable market that's just sitting out there, and I think Doug has talked about this, curious to get his take on it over the years. But if you think about the direct market and you think about the newsstand, there's no reason why that same model can work today, where the direct market gets nicer printed comics, gets the things in the glossy paper, like they did in the 80s. That was a successful model for a period of time, and they take advantage of these movies and this flood of content and go to the Targets and the Walmarts, put it out on newsstand print there, where the hassles of having to juggle this stuff make more sense too. There's a lot of different ways you can do this and make the economies work. But Doug, you've been covering this kind of exact topic for many, many years now, of how things have changed.
Yeah, I just think it comes down to, there's so many factors, one of which is probably groupthink, and there's a bunch of cronyism and nepotism in the industry, and at some point in time, it's just everybody thinks the exact same way, and for whatever reason, a guy like Peter Simeti here, they are the ones that have been elbowed out, but because you're not part of the club, you're not part of the cool kids club or whatever, then we're just going to dismiss your opinions outright, and you don't get to come in. And then if you do have a good idea, they've doubled down and tripled down and quadrupled down on bizarre ideas that don't work for so long that now it's just they're digging in their heels almost. It seems like out of spite, they would rather let the industry burn than admit that someone like Peter knows what he's talking about.
And the funny thing too, to go back to what Dave was saying about print on demand, we do a printing partnership at Alterna where you can get a minimum of 500 copies printed up on newsprint, piggybacks onto our print run, and it's 50 cents a copy. 50 cents a copy. So these are some of the our print on demand versions. The printing partnership program, we have books here that have been done. And one of the people who's had their books done is in the chat by the name of Paula Ritchie. and her book is soulbound. So she was very nervous about how the colors would come out and things like that. And I said, it's going to be just fine. Just fine. So she loves them. They came out great. It saved her a ton of money compared to going and getting them done print on demand and doing it with a digital press. And it's nice, quick, and easy. And that's all on alternacomics.com/PPP. And we wanted to do this basically to help out everybody that I kept seeing in Artist Alley struggling because their books were $5-6 and they were barely making anything because the printing is so high. But they said, at least I don't have to print too many, and I can just get them done as opposed to a big offset run. And I was like, I'm having a great show. I'm selling hundreds of books, and I'm going through Artist Alley, and this person's like, I barely sold 15, 20 this weekend. And I'm thinking like, wow, we had a great show, and everybody kept going and buying stacks of Alterna. And one of the reasons they could do that is because they're so affordable. So they just go, oh, I like it, I want to get it. That's it. It's not the talk of, I only got so much money, I'm at the show, I want to get something from everybody. So we figured let's have everybody join in on our printing partnership, and they can get these books made affordably, sell them for $2 or $3, still make a lot of profit on it, and not have to take all that risk up right up front.
So another thing I want to jump on this, it's kind of different. I have a 4-year-old son, and I read comic books with him. I can't let him really play with a Marvel or a DC comic because they're $5.
Yeah.
And, I can't share this with him because he might wrinkle it or something. But my Alterna comics,
I kind of roll the dice with that. I'm like, yeah, let's look at this let's look at this comic that I could sell for $50. We'll just open it up and look at it.
But like my Mighty Mascots or a couple of other the for kids comics that I have through Alterna, I'll sit down there. We can handle it. I don't mind if he gets a little wrinkle in it because I haven't invested quite as much money. The book's still important to me, but it doesn't feel like as much of a risk, and I get to share it with my kids and stuff. I think that a big thing is they price the book so high that they feel like like something you can't even share with anybody anymore. You need to lock them up.
You got to put them in some kind of plastic case.
Yeah.
I put a plug out. Peter mentioned in the chat, but the Alternaween, I have to say that word easily. It's a great campaign, but I posted pictures on Twitter. Peter will remember it last Halloween. I got the set and I was handing them out off people who were coming for candy, and kids were taking them after putting them in their bag and then getting out and sitting on the steps of my house reading it out in the dark. It was cute and touching, but then they're cramming it back into the little pumpkin trick-or-treat bag and other things, and they didn't care if it was getting bent up, which is good at that age. That is actually good. This is seeding the market of the future. And if you're going to talk to a parent or any kid about having to protect and bag and board a $5 comic, it's a detractor to reading. And what you want is this flood of content into these kids' hands, and yes, getting cut up, getting destroyed, making collages out of whatever you happen to do, that helps. It grows the market for the next 20 years, and that has gone away. So Alterna is great if you haven't heard about it or seen it, but the happiness of the kids who you would think all they want is chocolate and candy, of getting just a comic at the door, that's awesome. They love it.
Right, and what was great too is that our comics, you can fold them, and we had a couple people, they would fold them up and they would put a king-size candy bar in there, so they were the most popular house on the block. That's a house you go to every year. Alternaween is great. It's on Indiegogo right now. You can get I think the lowest tier to get the books to use as trick or treats. It's like $25. The shipping is free for US backers. You get a poster with it. We're doing an Alterna calendar, which is exclusive to the campaign. It's just a fun thing. I mean, when I was a kid, and I know a bunch of other kids too, you love getting a calendar. You can kind of write in it. You can put your homework and stuff down in it. But it's just fun because it's comic books. So it's all these cool, fun, colorful characters, and it's just something that's exclusive to the campaign. It's not going to be sold anywhere else. And then speaking of comics and treating them kind of like crap as a kid, I still have, this was from a live stream the other day, I dug this up. This is my very first comic. As you could see, it's in 2 pieces. Right, and now, I joke, this has some of the very first ever Peter Simeti coloring work on it. I thought Spidey could use blue eyes. I was like about 4 or 5 at the time. Cap and Tarantula here, they've got blue faces. And Spidey again has blue eyes. And I've got Spidey colored up in the corner. I don't know why I was hell-bent on Spidey having blue eyes. I don't know. To me, I must have thought that it didn't work. But even on this, right? Now I saved both. I got the front and the back cover. It's just to shreds, as you guys can see, because I loved the hell out of it. But it's funny to me to see this kind of stuff. I think I'm still waiting on these subscriptions. Let's see. I wanted Captain America, Daredevil, Fantastic Four, Incredible Hulk, and Iron Man when I was a kid. It looks like. But it's great, and the thing is that like I said, I read the crap out of it to the point. I mean, even my mom would put my name in the comic, so I didn't. And if it got lost at school or whatever, it's all over the place too. My stinking name's on the front and the back and on the inside and on the cover. My mom's like putting it everywhere. But I loved this comic, and I still have it. And I rebought an issue, obviously, to have a nice, good copy. But I still have this one. It's still bagged and boarded because I love it, and it means something to me. So even though it's not worth a damn thing, probably, to me it's worth $1 million because this is like my first comic. And that's something that's special to me about Alterna is that a lot of kids last year, they got their first ever comic. And it's not just about creating new readers. It's about maybe this kid gets his first comic too, and he goes, wow, I'm in love with these things, and I want to read more, and I want to make my own one day. Maybe the next greatest comic creator is because, they come out because of the fact that they got an Alterna comic. That's kind of cool. So we need to get this kind of stuff going again. Fun with comics and getting kids into comics and all that kind of stuff. It's great.
Yeah. So, Doug, I'd like to hear your perspective. I know you've talked quite a few times about how you learned to read literally on Spider-Man. Like, how tragic is it that they've basically just given up making books that are accessible to children anymore?
Yeah, it's one of those things where that's where shoehorning the weirdo political partisan stuff into the books, where all it is just 22 pages or whatever of propaganda, that's not going to get kids into comic books. Having characters that for pages and pages are just what was it? Was it Hulk, where she was on a cooking show for multiple issues, and it was just like essentially the Food Network put into Marvel Comics or whatever? That's not going to cultivate the next generation of comic book readers. And so it's like they simultaneously say that guys like us they don't really care about us anymore, even though we're going to live until 80, 85 years old, and I'm perfectly fine buying good stories until I die. So that they've disregarded us, but then for little kids, they just want to give them propaganda. Although I guess if you are an ideologue, you want to give little kids propaganda, but and it's not working. And like you said, it's really kind of sad, because if I'm blessed with a kid in the near future, I'm not going to read him new comic books. If anything, I would go back to the old school Spider-Man and read my son or daughter those books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Doug, sorry, go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Perch.
No, Doug or Tim, and bring Tim into the conversation. Do you guys? So one of the things I've observed in cons and being on panels and other things is that the big two in particular, they think they are making comics for kids. When they talk, they're like, we have a young adult line. This is absolutely it. And then lately, especially in the last year, look at some interviews. There's some frustration with the parents saying, we're making these comics for kids. You need to get them to read it. Why aren't you forcing them to read these comics? They're for them. The creator of the Unstoppable Wasp, not Uncancelable Wasp, the Wasp, has made these comments many times. Like, I'm making this book, and it's for kids, and the parents need to do a better job of supporting it. Why aren't you buying it and giving it to those kids? And you pick it up and Pilkey, Telgemeier, other people who are just raking it in this market do not make books like that. They do make books for that audience. And you would never pick up Wasp and say, oh, this is just like Dav and Dogman. Completely different. And as a result, the kids aren't interested. But what do you guys, Tim and what do you guys think?
Tim?
Well, I mean, I don't want to get into too much inside baseball, but it's like, you know how Marvel, they recently licensed out their some of their properties to IDW, and I mean, you can kind of see the writing on the wall. I think the reason they did that is because IDW, they have a track record of doing very well with some of their licensed properties that are kid-centric. For example, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I know that Sergeant Bats reads religiously. I mean, that is a great book. The storytelling harkens back to when we were kids. You would have these kind of action-adventure stories that had some violence in them, had a few adult themes, but they were at a level where if you were 10 years old, you wouldn't mind it. It would be the type of almost coming of age type storytelling where, yeah, you're going to see people get hurt, but it's nothing over the top. It's things that you would feel very comfortable letting someone read. And so I think because of IDW's track record of generally being very successful with these lines, like Back to the Future, it's another really good licensed property that I think is very, very safe for children and adults to read. So you see Marvel kind of doing this this farming of the license, and I think they do that because they're like, hey, none of the people in our core team, they don't get children. Like either they don't understand, or we know that they have something that they're going to try and push. And I think like what you were saying with, like I know it's like the Wasp comic, even though it's supposedly kid centric. I was looking at some pages the other day and I was like, this guy doesn't get kids. Like you can just tell that this is just not a book it's more trying to indoctrinate them or brainwash them into a certain mindset or worldview than it is trying to tell a good story. And that's sad. The book I recommend, you guys were having that Spider-Man stream a few weeks ago, and the book that I actually bought 2 copies of it because at the time it was out of print, and it's since been reprinted, which is good. But I think that the best modern retelling of Spider-Man that is good for all ages is Spider-Man Loves Mary Jane by Sean McKeever. It's basically what if Spider-Man was told from like an Archie standpoint, where Mary Jane is the main character and she's basically like she's the observer from our point of view. So they actually never show that Peter Parker and Spider-Man are the same person. You just assume that they're 2 different people. So it's a joy to read if you're a Spider-Man fan because you get this fresh perspective on the character. But as a child or a young teen being introduced to a character the first time, you know, you can read this whole story and maybe you piece it together at the end. But it's a very heartwarming and touching tale. It's more of a slice of life than it is a superhero story. And so I thought it was actually pretty genius for its time. But, you know, unfortunately, we don't see that type of storytelling nowadays. I actually tried to get a copy for Doug at one point for him to read, but like I said, it was out of print. Luckily, it is back in print, but they're publishing it. I think instead of doing the 2 hardcovers that they had in the past, I think it's broken down into single trades that are like 2 or 3 issues each.
That's interesting. So I don't know. I think we've kind of hit the all the publishing kind of stuff. I wanted to talk about more really political, but just kind of the way that the divide in the country is that people have kind of gotten really hysterical of late. And I know when I watch David streams one time, and he said, "Well, I know no matter what I do and no matter what precautions I take, eventually YouTube is going to remove my channel from the service just because they think they know my like political views." And it really has gone crazy because I think Peter has never even talked politics that I've ever seen, like on Twitter or on his YouTube channel, and like he was crucified just for not like speaking down to his audience. Like, what was that like, Peter? Are you still dealing with that kind of harassment?
Yeah, I just don't. It's become. It's funny because we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of the biggest amount of it, not the only amount of it. That's the thing, because I've been dealing with this kind of stuff for about 5+ years, here and there, way before anything like a Comicsgate or whatever was coined. So it just started to hit heavier when we put the newsprint out. As soon as we had launched the newsprint line in like I'd say March of 2017, the books didn't come out till May, but they were solicited in March. we started getting a lot of people saying, "Oh, Alterna is going to go under in December. By the end of the year. This is never going to take off. This is going to kill the industry. All this kind of stuff." And this is kind of what I heard too when we launched in 2006, when we were just going to really do graphic novels. Everyone thought that was the craziest idea ever. No one's going to want graphic novels. That's not going to work. We were going to go under. Yada yada yada. And of course, we've had our share of road bumps, especially starting out. But 2017 was interesting because we were doing better and better every single month because of these single issues. And by the end of the year, when I had announced something like it was our best year ever because of this, it started with a lot of different attacks at that point. Literally on New Year's Day, January of 2018, and then it kept on kind of happening almost every time we'd have good news. In particular, with this thing that occurred last year. What was funny about that was our blockchain policy, our block list policy. I hate calling it blockchain because that's a whole different thing, but the industry has adopted that kind of speech. What's funny about that is the fact that we were all about the whole policy states, and it's public, as you can see it on the Alterna site. All it states is that creators can block people that they're having an unwanted experience with, if they're getting harassed, anything like that. But don't use blockchain stuff, because what happened, and I've been a part of them, I didn't even really realize it until I got submissions in. And I'm looking through to see what the social media is like, how do creators promote, how do they interact with other people. And I'm like, wow, I'm blocked by these people. In some cases, I was blocked by the person submitting something in there. And I'm like, I don't think they realize it. I don't think they realize that I'm blocked, because I don't know why they then would submit. So I started realizing that all these kind of block lists were going around, and I thought, there's so much collateral damage that takes place there. There's no need for it. There's no need whatsoever. And I think Perch has mentioned stuff like this before, that even when these pile-ons seem to happen for some people, they think it's thousands of people, and at the end of the day, maybe it's 10 or 20 at the most. And you can just easily, if it's so bad, you could just go in there, block individually. If it's so bad, I have nobody blocked. I have people muted at this point because it's nonstop still in some cases. But there was such tremendous backlash for us saying, hey, you can block individually, and if you're getting harassed, absolutely let me know, and we'll look into it. And depending how severe it is, we'll get local authorities involved and whatnot that we need to do. And I'll stand by our creators if they're getting harassed. But don't start blockchaining people and just swarms of this kind of guilt by association mentality. It's not good business, and it's just, honestly, it's not practical. Because if you meet someone at a show, at a convention, is there a way to blockchain this person? Is there a way to block them? And do we look through internet histories before we sell comics? Do we look through your Twitter profile before we shake your hand at a show, before we thank you for your purchase? None of these things make any lick of sense in the real world. And that's primarily where we operate, is the real world. Twitter we're just on there to talk about what we're doing, to interact with fans that we can't actually meet at a show in that moment in time. And it's beautiful for that. It's great. So to want to create a negative experience out of it by blocking someone who's never had an interaction with you, that puts you behind the 8 ball automatically, and there's no reason for it. So that was all that we had. That's all we had to say, and everyone went nuts about it. Absolutely nuts. And I'd like to say that stuff has stopped, but I just mostly ignore a lot of it at this point.
It's terrible what Peter went through, and I'll throw this fact out for everybody and shut back up again. But if you go and apply for a job in the tech industry, particularly one that has any kind of public-facing aspect to it, whether it's a Netflix or Amazon actually has this policy. I've heard that Disney Plus will have this policy. If you're a creator that's interacting in marketing or in fan outreach, they have the exact same policy Peter does. I know for a fact Amazon does. This is not some unusual thing that only Peter or only Republican sites have, or whatever it happens to be politically. It's common business sense. It goes back to earlier. A lot of these people running the show do not have business sense, but Peter's policy mirrors Amazon's policy. So if you're going to be upset and go after Peter, better go after Amazon and Disney and others that are doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think
crazy. I know. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it goes more into the mentality of like there's no a lot of these people view there's no common ground with other people who think differently from me, or there's no they're wrong, and it's not just that they're wrong, they're bad, right? So you're blocked for being bad, not for like putting things out that I'm interacting with that I don't like. Like I have people that are blocked on Twitter, but it's because they are spamming me with garbage. Right? Like, why would I do that? I have people that I banned off the YouTube channel. I used to ban nobody, and I changed that policy because of what I call bell ringing, which is on YouTube, you can have somebody that's spamming so hard with things that are off topic that nobody can have a conversation with anybody else. Like if you're, this live chat here is pretty good, nobody's being a jerk, but on my live chats, I'll have people that come in and want to start talking about the Holocaust or something, and I'm like, you're out of here, dude. You're gonna get my video banned just by you talking, because YouTube does use the live chat to determine whether things should be monetized or restricted. So when somebody comes in and does that, they're actually assaulting my livelihood, but they're also making it so nobody can actually talk about the topic at hand. And it's like if I'm having a live stream on how to write prose, I still can't have ads on my live stream on how do you write prose. Let's write some prose together. Here I'm going to write a paragraph of text because people are spamming the comments with something about Jews. Like that's just I have to at some point put a stop to that, because it's just nobody can actually have free speech when you're unable to process anything. So like I've had the extreme scale of that, and I don't use blockchains, but if somebody is individually like spamming me with garbage I don't care about, I'm just going to block them, because the optionality is towards blocking. They're not going to buy anything from me anyway. Their friends aren't going to buy anything from me. Like, why would I need that interaction? I just don't need it.
Yeah, I definitely block the Toons Mags guys that always spam all my tweets or whatever.
Like it.
Yeah.
It's like every time it's like, this doesn't have anything to do with what I'm talking about. But, so Tim, I know you have your Twitter handle is POTUS Thumb. I know you get like hate mail for your fake Donald Trump bunny, right?
Yeah, I'm a cartoon rabbit, not Donald Trump.
Yeah, I do. But it's actually not as often as you'd think, maybe once a month. So it's actually not as bad. Actually, so when you had that lead in with the topic, I was going to tell you that there's been an irony as of late. The irony is that I used to get hounded by a lot of social justice warriors and people on the left. Now they leave me alone. I honestly haven't gotten much vitriol within the last few months. Knock on wood. I'm going to knock on wood actually here. There we go. Mm-hmm. So it's been actually kind of calm. I like it. I don't want to get into too much detail, but pretty much all my attacks now actually come from the right, which is even funnier. So I don't know. We live in a clown world right now. Up is down, black is white, that type of thing. I really feel for Peter, because Peter's the one person who, like I said, or like you said, hasn't really worn his politics on his sleeve at all. And so I think that just common business sense should not get you any ire, but it's a lot of that pettiness that's going on. I've learned a lot of things just being in the political arena. I've had these talks with Doug and with Brett, and it's that I came into this in 2017 kind of fired and ready to go, because I really did see it as a left and right issue. And then now that I'm deeply involved in more of a political kind of insider scene, it really has nothing to do with left and right. It has to do a lot with a lot of the struggles for power that occur no matter on which side you're in, and it has to deal with a lot of pettiness, a lot of jealousy, and there's a lot of infighting that goes on that a lot of the public doesn't even notice. So I've been pretty happy this year in terms of not getting the ire of people who might be crazy or on the other side of the political spectrum. But you never know. If Doug's post on going to Best Buy and comparing 2 racks can bring out the swarms of people, maybe I shouldn't count my chickens yet before they hatch.
Yeah, so I mean, Doug, you just had your book. Did you see any people, on either side, like specifically trying to maybe railroad your campaign or make it more difficult for you and your team?
Well, I was talking about that last night on the stream. I don't want to get into like conspiracy theories or anything, but for the past year, I've generally flown under the radar of these people for a long time. I don't personally attack people. I try and keep my conversations at a sort of cruising altitude, rhetorically, of 33,000 feet or whatever. And no one's messed with me. And I've made all sorts of tweets, and I've done things on Captain Marvel before. Nothing. Right after the Soulfinder Demons Match campaign ended, it was successful. We raised over $33,000. I let people know I'm in this for the long haul. I got a 2020 project coming. Boom, like this blows up. And then I was seeing a lot of people that are actually like rabid anti-Team Comics, Comicsgate, whatever you want to call it. They were in these Captain Marvel comments of these people that are essentially frenzied and swarming my feed, and I'm like, I wonder if like there was a tipping point that was reached where it's like, oh, he's officially a creator now. This book is coming out. It's real. We need to turn him into a villain or something like that, because for so long I was under the radar, and then bam, it was just like a light switch. And 3 days now, it's still during the stream, people are still commenting. So I don't know. Maybe it's not related, but I just think
absolutely related.
It is related.
It's absolutely related.
It's an interesting coincidence. I guess we'll put it that way.
So do you think
well, you're on that? Oh, you're on that list, by the way. So you know you are on the radar, and I think, and Peter's seen it. Anytime you get some popular book or something out, it goes out in the Facebook groups and other places where it's here's somebody who's making some noise, his business is successful. It's jealous, and they come at you, and your name has popped up in these retailer groups all the time. I've posted on it on Twitter. It happens, and it's all about success. You do something, it's jealousy.
So do you think timing has to do with because I know Richard C. Meyer, before his Jawbreakers ended, people started attacking him like with a week to go, and it spiked his sales up by like $50,000 or something crazy.
It's that anti-fragility.
So they're specifically timing it. Well, you can't mess with him until it's over, and now you can try and put the hammer down on him.
Yeah, no, it's really quite bizarre. And I've heard that I'm on lists or whatever. So maybe it's just my turn. It's at some point in time they go down the list and they just keep trying to whack-a-mole guys like us or whatever. And if they could knock one of us out, great for them. If not, then they'll come back to you later. So maybe Tim will get it a couple months from now when Black Ops 2 comes out or whatever, and who knows? It's an interesting time to be on social media, but I welcome it because I have nothing to hide. I stand by my work. I stand by my commentary. Like I said, I'm not saying bizarre things that are I'm not attacking people or whatever, and I just try and do these sort of at most merry prankster sort of a little kind of glimmer in your eye, and you just take it with a grain of salt. And as long as you laugh at some of these people, then I don't know. I think in the long run, I'll be okay.
So Doug, you're the only guy on the panel that's a part of 616 canon, correct?
I'm sorry?
You're the only person that's a part of Marvel Comics canon, right?
Oh, yeah, no. So yeah, for those that don't know, Max Bemis actually put a Nazi Ernst villain in his book about 5 or 6 months after I was criticizing his behavior online. So so the Ernst villain is now part of Moon Knight lore or whatever, and I'm in there. And my brother actually asked me to sign the copies, and one of my other Twitter subscribers recently, he was like, yeah, man, can you sign these for me? That's actually pretty interesting. So that's another thing where I just sort of laugh at it, and maybe the Ernst villain will show up again in the future.
Hopefully.
Hey, I'll throw this out as just a quick word. I've seen this pop up in Twitter a bunch of places and in some of these face groups and other things. The strategy here, as it seems to be shaping out, is a desperate attempt to get the Indiegogo platform in particular to cancel a book or a project after it's been funded. So the hope is that they can get something completely funded, get it done, and then make enough of a noise about what an awful person it is and everything else, and get it canceled and throw a wrench into that system of having a successful thing, but then it doesn't make it out to fans, and then it deteriorates people wanting to fund it in the future. that is a stated goal of a number of these people, and that is, I think, why it's moved to the harassment that comes right after the campaign finishes. They didn't realize it was pre-marketing while it was going on. So it's something for us to watch out for. I think it is definitely something people want to do, and I see no sign that IDG will do it, but that is a goal.
I thought the difference between Indiegogo and Kickstarter was that the creator actually got the money as the campaign went along.
It does, and I think there's a desire for, or I don't know the exact time, but there's a desire to have it basically in a recall. I think this is an impossible dream, but that is the attempt, is to get some level of, you can never publish on this platform again, or you're banned, or what have you.
So there's just to clarify, there's a critical time with Indiegogo. It's not pay as you go. What happens is that Indiegogo keeps 5% for themselves. They keep 3% that go, well, they don't keep. There is a 3% charge for the credit card processing. And then a new rule that was implemented within this year was they keep an additional 5% as a reserve for refunds. That way, in case anyone wants a refund, you can actually dip into that reserve and let people have them. Now, I don't know how this works because it seems to be variable, but apparently they run some kind of check on you. Because, for example, when we did like Trump Space Force, I think they held our funds for 2 weeks. When we did Walmart, it was almost immediate. Like within 2 or 3 days, it was already sent to my bank. And so it kind of depends on the person. So these guys, if they want to cause some trouble, they have a very critical window to do it, because once the funds are flushed into a bank account, that's it. It's done. But from what I've been hearing is, if Indiegogo is keeping a reserve of 5% for refunds, and if it tends to be variable in terms of how long they're willing to hold them, it becomes more important for us to release books on time, because as we don't, it means that they're going to have a little bit more leverage, because they know that Indiegogo is holding onto funds for a greater period of time, which means that if they're going to hold on to those funds for 2 weeks, that's a 2-week window where these people can actually strike.
That's
yeah, exactly, and we should be careful about that. And it's the second project. In some cases, it's like, well, this first one got out, but we're going to kill the ability for this person to publish on the platform in the future, and be more skeptical. So this is something to be aware of. And I think your last point is absolutely dead on. Books have to be released on time, not just for doing the right thing for your audience and the people who funded it, but also for this exact reason. You cannot let the books drag out.
Yeah, the independent creators in many ways need to be beyond reproach almost. We have to strive for the ideals that we've always talked about for so long, because when you have all these people gunning for you, any little opening that they can get to drive a wedge between you and your customers, or you and the platforms that are the go-betweens, the Indiegogos or whatever, they're going to use that. And so that's why I think, like Tim was saying, it's very important to get these books out on time and just to be on the up and up on everything.
There was a pro. I was listening to his stream last night. It was really good. He was giving some very good insights, but he said something that I fundamentally disagreed with that Perch mentioned. So he mentioned, someone in the chat had asked about refunds, and he was like, I'm just going to tell you this. I've been giving refunds, but I am under no obligation to do it. You need to read the terms of service better for Indiegogo and Kickstarter. You're essentially, this is actually a donation company. We are actually not entitled to give you refunds. I don't owe you a refund. If I like you, I'm going to give you a refund. But otherwise, you're just going to have to wait, because, we don't even have to give you a product. You can give us money and you can complain all you want. I am not entitled to give you a product. You're just you should just be happy that I'm going to give you one. Like, that's professionalism. And I disagreed, because I was like, no. Yes, I know that that's written. So that's the letter of the law. But the spirit of the law is that you, as a professional, you know what's really happening. You know that there's money being exchanged for product. So the real professional thing to do, the thing that is ethical, is go beyond that. And if you know that they're giving you money for service, you provide a service, which is product. And if they ask you for a refund, you give a refund. Not unless you explicitly state in your campaign or whatever, there's some stipulations to it. So again, we don't want to make it harder for people who don't like us to find an excuse to come after us. And if Indiegogo is actively looking at our reputations and our track record for delivery, we don't want to give an excuse to have that window open further, because then people who are actively trying to disparage us or destroy our business, they'll know, well, this person is late, or this person can't get things out on time. We know that Indiegogo is probably going to hold their money a little bit longer. Now's the time to strike. You don't want that. You want it so that Indiegogo trusts us. It doesn't even matter if it's Indiegogo, whatever platform it might be, Kickstarter as well. If they trust us and they know that we're reputable and they know that we can get a product out in time, they're more likely to give us money sooner. And I just know that for a fact based on the 2 campaigns that I've done within the last year, that there was a major time disparity in terms of when those funds got to us. So I'm very happy, Perch, that you told us that, because I have no clue. I mean, like I said, I've actually gone through the whole year not really being dogged or anything, and I'm very happy for that. But knowing that they're still out there means that we should always be kind of on alert.
Yeah, I think, and what you said, ship your comics on time. I understand there are worse people who have taken more time. That's cool. Don't be one of the worst people. Just get your comics out on time. Don't leave yourself and others through this vulnerability. It's just bad business. And just understand, Indiegogo right now is a great platform for people to get books out and get things funded. And so you have to understand the people who are angry and outraged about this every single day, they're going after that platform. And every single day they wake up thinking about it. So don't leave yourself vulnerable.
This is I'm gonna interject a slight thought, which is this is the difference between the real world and the digital world. People act very strange on social media compared to how they would act with normal people. Imagine that this Indiegogo stuff was like a local business. Would you be going to try to shut the power off of some local business, or would you just not shop there? Like, it's really extreme, some of the strange behavior we see from people on Twitter and these other social media platforms. Once you put on a veil of anonymity, or even a pseudo veil of anonymity, people start acting almost inhuman in a way. They say and they do things that they would never do face to face. If I were to go to a con or something, even my worst enemy would probably shake my hand, because there's like a human interaction there. It's just absent from this digital sphere, and I think that's kind of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, Peter, have you met any of the people that ended up actually attacking you? Because I know, comic books is a pretty small community. I'm sure that you had run into those people before. They actually knew you, but once they were on social media, they stopped treating you like a person, essentially, right?
Oh yeah, a bunch of them. I'd say for the ones that I recognize, and that's the weird part, is that I did mention before about how it seems like it's a lot of people, and it's not really a lot of people. In my case last year, it was a hell of a lot of people. I think I ended up muting close to 1,000 people who just wouldn't stop. Literally 1,000 people. It was like on the mute, who I have muted with the accounts, just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and it became unbearable. It was 2 weeks of just nonstop. And a lot of those people I knew in some form. A lot of them I published work. A lot of them had work there at the time. A lot of them, it just, people get caught up in stuff. And I think to what Dave was saying, it's kind of like that mob mentality, and you become a part of the mob as opposed to a part of, you're just an individual representing your own thoughts and your own feelings. You kind of just jump on to the outrage.
Actually, that was something with the Captain Marvel people yesterday. They throw that out at me. They're always like, "Your team, what do you think about your boycott?" And this and I was like, "What are you talking about? My team? I never even talked about boycotts. I've never mentioned a boycott, whatever, in years of anything." And it's just I don't know. It's like the strangest thing where it's because they have this Borg-like mentality, then they assume that everybody does. I was like, I only speak for myself. I don't speak for other people, but for whatever reason, they can't get that we're actually see ourselves as individuals, that, we obviously have a connection to the greater, the whole or whatever, but ultimately we're not trying to speak for another man, but that can't sink through their head for whatever reason.
Well, that's the mindset of, a bigot or a racist. You look like, or you say something like someone I don't like, so therefore you must be exactly like them, and therefore I don't like you either. And that's a dangerous mindset, and it's something that unfortunately is kind of, for some people, it's at the core of their humanity.
Yeah, I thinking of the Captain Marvel thing because I made some content on Captain Marvel. You know, people were I made a review and I was honest with the review, right? And I could have been dishonest and been like, this movie was terrible. I was just kind of a mediocre movie. It was bad for the Marvel standard. And I had people come in, it's like, oh, it made all this money. What do you think about that now? I'm like, I said it would be successful. Like, I don't know why you think that I said that it wouldn't be a successful movie. I went on record saying, guys, there's a long track record of quality Marvel movies. People are going to just look at that when they go see this movie. They're not going to care about what Brie Larson said in some social media post that they never saw. And so I was right, you know, and I said, hey, but what you are going to see is when this comes out, you're going to see people saying, if it's not successful, it's the result of the online trolls. And if it is successful, it's the result of, you know, we overcame the evil online trolls who said the movie was going to suck. People assumed I was in some sort of weird team that was like, I want Captain Marvel to suck. I'm like, I never said that. I didn't say it. I said I think it'd be successful.
It's one of the weird things, you know. I'll do some negative reviews on the channel for comics I think are particularly poor. And sometimes they'll come into their comments and be like, "Wow, it sounds like something I'll enjoy. I'm buying me a copy." I'm like, "Good. I want comics to do great. I want comics. I don't care if I like them. I'm just, you know, if you're a prospective buyer and you think we have similar interests, you might enjoy the review. I don't care if you spend it or not." Like they're doing something to me personally. Like, good, spend more money on comics.
Yeah, I'd love for all the comics to sell 1 million copies. You know, anyone in comics who doesn't like me, I want your comic to do incredibly well. You know, especially if it's in a comic shop. I'd love to have it do well. That means that the industry thrives, and that means that comic shop is making money, and that means that they can then turn around and go, hey, we can get in other comics and other products, and more people get excited about comics, and more readers and everything else. I mean, I'd love to see everyone do incredibly well.
Well, that was actually the difference between the YouTubers in this particular network that I've seen over the years. There's been plenty of reviews where people are like, yeah, this guy regularly calls me racist, bigot, homophobe, Nazi. Sorry to get your YouTube algorithm there, but this guy's work, his actual story here is good. I don't agree with this guy's politics. I think they're actually kind of repugnant. I don't like when he calls me names and tries to destroy my character, but say Chip Zdarsky's, some of his issues of Spider-Man, the later ones, his run on Daredevil or whatever, these sorts of things, it's like, yeah, they're good stories. So we are actually able to separate the actual creative work from the person's personal politics, whereas with them, it's like once they know your personal politics, you are just straight up evil and you need to be taken out or whatever. It's an interesting divide, I guess.
If all the artists that I respect were anathema to me just based on politics, I would have no one to look up to. Like, it's so crazy. Because sometimes you'll have that other criticism. People will be like, well, if the shoe was on the other foot, like, you'd feel the same way. And it's like, no. I mean, for the last decade, I've pretty much been surrounded by people on the left, and they're good people. We just happen to disagree politically. And no, I didn't lose my mind or anything like that. I still respect them. I still support them, too. For example, I think he's not too vocal, but he's said enough on Twitter. But I know, like, Frank Cho and Adam Hughes, for example, I know that they're on the left, but I love their stuff. I think their art's really good. And then when I see them at conventions, I'll typically pick up a print or a postcard or whatever they might have. And I think that they're courteous individuals. I don't think that they demonize me either. But it's still this mentality where it's like in civil discourse, you are going to have those little disagreements. It's just how far do you take it, and do you have that guilt by association, and at what point are you demonizing someone to the point where you don't patronize them at all? And there is a fine line. There's a dividing line. I mean, there is a point where even someone I disagree with politically, when they start attacking other people and they try to actually deplatform and get rid of people's business. Every customer and every person has a line that they draw, whether that be as part of principle or as part of their personality. So, yeah, the whole thing is just It's just ridiculous. But I also don't, I think most people here agree that we don't mean ill will towards the people who don't agree with us. I mean, as part of the nature of the comics industry thriving, we would like to see more sales, even if those sales tend to be with books that I don't like. I mean, even me, part of the reason why I kind of dipped out of comics for a number of years was because I just said, well, the market's no longer for me. But hey, you're doing well. You're selling these books that I don't like. More power to you. And then, it was through people like Doug where I discovered, like, oh wait, I'm not alone. There are other people who feel like it's not just that the comics are no longer for me. It's the fact that something has happened in the industry that's usurped kind of the norm of what they were before.
Yeah, so like Saga isn't a book that I like at all, but I am happy that there's a Saga out there for those fans that want stories like that. It's original, the original characters, and the fans of Saga love it. I'm great. Those fans deserve to have great books being written with new characters for them. Like, that doesn't bother me at all. I think everybody deserves to have a comic book written that's specifically in their wheelhouse and something that they love. I don't understand why the comic industry doesn't do more stuff like Saga and try and build on that, because there's obviously an audience for it. Perch,
real quick. Speaking of which, some people were asking me privately and some publicly. I just never responded to it. They were asking me about like the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez comic, and they're like, "Hey, you should talk about this. Like, isn't this ridiculous?" And I didn't say anything publicly, but privately, I said to a lot of people, I was like, "No, I'm actually all for that." They're like, "What?" And it's like, they're not perverting a legacy character. They're creating their own work. It's a work of parody. If these people didn't come after me for what I did, I'm not going to go after them. I mean, they're more power to them. I mean, let the market has room for two different political viewpoints, and we'll just see how it goes. And I just think that as part of personal principle, that's just how it is. So what you said, with Saga is the same thing. Not my forte, not yours either. But hey, good for the people who do, because they read it and they, they're keeping people employed and they're enjoying themselves. There's nothing wrong with that.
So it looks like Brett Smith has joined the chat. Are you here, sir?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, Brett.
How's it going?
Welcome to the 1,000 sub celebration, Brett.
Yeah, that's
How
awesome.
many copies
Congratulations.
of AOC's comic did you get, brother?
Oh, say that again?
How many copies of the AOC comic book did you get?
Probably the same as everyone else, 0.
Yeah, I think it.
I actually did buy it to review it, so.
Jeez.
I think it shipped like
Taking one for Doug's taking one for the team.
It did not do well. It did not do well in Seattle, and for God's sake, that's a market it needs to do well.
Well, yeah, exactly. This was put out by my old boss, Josh Blaylock. I worked for Devil's Due for almost 2.5 years, coloring G.I. Joe with Tim Seeley, and I'm just kind of surprised that it didn't do as well as I think it could have. And if it didn't do well in Seattle, then I'm not convinced that these people, these SJWs and these people on the regressive left, are actual customers. They like to complain and they piss and moan and whatnot, but they don't seem to put their money where their mouth is. They don't support creators like Josh, who are obviously trying to cater to them. So, perhaps it had something to do with the absolutely horrific artwork that it had.
Yeah. They also got a little bit of trouble for, I guess, stealing Wonder Woman's character design. Was that what it was?
Well, yeah, and that certainly gave them a lot of eyeballs. Getting kind of, I think they got a cease and desist or something from DC, and you would think that would have kind of had sort of a Streisand effect. I mean, they got a lot of publicity. They got coverage on Fox News. They got coverage on, I think, CNN. A bunch of different, large media outlets picked up the story after that happened. And it didn't seem to have much effect on sales, which was, curious, strange.
Well, I can tell you every single comic news outlet had a feature story or two on that comic book. It was very much well publicized and in the front of everyone's face if you read comic book news.
Yeah. Yeah, it's strange. It's very strange. I don't, I'm not sure what's going on with Devil's Due. They seem to try to, kind of turn it around. They bought a bunch of the first comics characters. They had Badger, and they relaunched Badger with Mike Baron, and that never really went anywhere. And it's something else that's really strange. I don't know what the answer is, but why can't you buy any of the old Devil's Due G.I. Joe books? None of them are in print. None of them are in circulation. I don't understand this, because there's some good stories there.
Might be a licensing issue, I'm guessing, because IDW has that now.
I guess it's possible, man. Isn't Marvel able to sell some of the old G.I. Joe stuff with Larry Hama and all that stuff in the 80s?
Under deep restrictions. They can, but there's really heavy restrictions, almost to the point that it's hard for them to put it into their distribution channel. So they are struggling with that quite a bit right now.
And I don't see really any Devil's Due comics in circulation. There's really no reprints. You can't really get anything. I worked on Micronauts. I worked on Voltron, G.I. Joe. I don't know what the deal is. It's very strange. It's obviously something that's going on with Devil's Due, but there's a lot of good material there, a lot of good content back in the day. I mean, Josh was kind of like on the forefront of that 80s craze that was going on in, 99, 2000, kind of going into 2005. That was sort of his forte, was relaunching all these 80s iconic, pop culture books, whether it was Voltron or G.I. Joe. It's strange. None of that stuff is in circulation. You can't even go on Amazon and buy it. You got to go to eBay and find old copies of stuff.
A lot of the agreements that were made in the 80s and 90s, and I'll be quoting this way too much inside baseball, I know, but they were written very poorly and very restrictive in odd ways. It's a big reason why Disney World in Orlando can't have Captain America walking around the park, but Disneyland can, because they signed an agreement based on the Mississippi River. It's some of the craziest stuff you've ever seen. By the way, that's not a joke. That's why Universal Studios up in Orlando, they have those characters, but Disney World can't, even though they own Marvel. It's this old agreement that literally separated the territory by the Mississippi River in the contract. No joke.
Nice.
I believe it. It's bizarre. It's just very strange to me. Even my buddy Val Staples, who bought the Masters in the Universe IP back in 2003, and he relaunched Masters in comic book form. I don't see those out there. These are all great books, and it's kind of too bad that they're not in circulation.
So now that you're here, Brett, I do have one question I wanted to ask you. So I remember, in the ramp up to the last election, people started losing their minds when they started thinking Trump could win. And all of a sudden he started sneaking his way into all the comic books and things like that. Do you think we're going to see something worse? I know Tom King is already planning on doing a Trump allegory for his bizarre, or the Strange Adventures book miniseries. Do you think that's going to be even ratcheted up even more this time, now that some of the, it feels like some of the reins are off of the creators?
Yeah, I do. I think it'll get much worse. We saw that, and you go back to 84 and you look at what was going on at the time after Reagan won. Nobody thought he would. And the attacks on him were ramped up. It really kind of went into overdrive. It went from, in the early 80s, he's just a stupid actor. He's a B-movie actor. Bedtime for Bonzo. This guy's not for real. And then once he won, it knocked everybody back on their heels. And going into 84, they really ramped it up. From there it was, he's evil. He helped create AIDS. He would sneak out of the White House and steal homeless people's pork and beans and take it back to the White House and eat it. He was a doddering old senile idiot who took his cues from Jim Baker and all these people in the behind the scenes. They were relentless. So they're going to ramp it up even more. I'm not exactly sure how you do that. when you've been calling the guy a Nazi and Hitler for the last 4 years. I guess maybe Satan or the Antichrist would probably be the next rung up the ladder.
They already call him Voldemort.
Yeah, these people are, they not only redefine lack of creativity, but they're, these people are mentally ill. I hated Obama. I hated his policies. I think he's one of the worst presidents to ever grace the Oval Office. But I never, and I openly called him a communist. I think he was a soft Marxist to a large degree. I think he still is. But these people today, they're just nuts, because none of this stuff mobilizes really anybody, other than it just gets people cranked up into sort of a lathered frenzy.
Yeah, that's the real question: is who are you convincing with your comic book story that's supposed to be an allegory of your vision of Donald Trump, probably nothing to do with his actual person? Who are you convincing with that? The people who are going to read that book already agree with you.
It's just preaching to the converted. It's nothing more than that. The left and the right, both have echo chambers, and it's one of the things that I'm really proud of with the work Tim and I have done with Thump and with Trump Space Force, was that we were able to attract people on the left. And it was the same with Clinton Cash graphic novel. I had not so much Hillary supporters, but I had a lot of Bernie people that emailed me and messaged me and would reach out to me and say, hey, I was a Bernie supporter, and now that Hillary has the nomination, I went and I read Clinton Cash graphic novel, and I was going to support her, but I can't. This woman and this guy is just, they're the worst. They're so corrupt. And a lot of those people became Trump supporters, including, probably the most notable one is Cassandra Fairbanks. She was a big Bernie supporter and read Clinton Cash graphic novel. Like a lot of people, once Hillary rigged the nomination with superdelegates and was able to secure that position, a lot of people were kind of like, okay, what do I do now? I was a Bernie supporter, so do I jump on the Hillary train? Do I support Jill Stein? What do I do? And in an effort to, get more information, some people tried to read Clinton Cash, the book, and had a hard time with it, like I did, like a lot of people did. So, they tried the graphic novel, or they just saw the graphic novel and said, oh, it looks interesting. So they read it. And at that point, most people that I knew either switched to Trump, voted for Stein, or they just sat on their hands and they just said, screw it. I don't see anybody here that really represents me. And, I'm just going to kind of hang back and let nature take its course. But I just don't think that these books really convince anybody of anything. It just makes people dig in, and I just don't think, I think it's just echo chamber to a large degree.
So Doug, you've been a critic for the industry for a long time. People got turned off on all this political stuff really fast, and it's died down to a degree. But do you think if it ratchets it up again, for the next election cycle, is it gonna kill even more readership? Are we gonna shrink it just because of some political views? Are they willing to lose audience over it?
Yeah, I've said before that people, it's not even a secret. Lana Smith was the one, if you voted for Trump, we'll remember, those sorts of things. They're ideologues at the top of the food chain within these companies. They don't care about losing money because, like I said before, they view us, anybody who's basically to the right of them, even if you're essentially a moderate, even if you've never said anything political like Peter here, you are a bad guy. And so they actually feel like they're part of some sort of moral crusade, and if they lose your money, they'll even say, I don't want your business, those sorts of things. And so there's so many, it's a multi-pronged problem. Across the board, there's all sorts of corrupted elements, I guess you could say. But as the election heats up, you could expect exactly what happened in 2016, because none of these people have changed and they're still in positions of power.
Yeah, I think one thing you have to remember is that some of these people would rather the institution fail than for them to give up control of it. So to have Marvel Comics disintegrate and become a front for licensing deals with other companies, which I think that's going to be the eventual end of the road for the big two. But for them that's not a big deal, because they view themselves as part of the bold 300. So if they die, if their company disintegrates making their last stand, well, they were righteous to do so, rather than looking at an inheritor of a long and important cultural history and institution which they should care for, and also try to keep that company afloat. That's not an issue. They'd rather destroy it than give up control of it.
There's just, I mean, there's a problem in the industry in general. There's not, and I would hope this is generally better behavior. Brett and I talked about this last time. There's not a financial stake for a lot of these people. They're independent contractors. So this is all sort of a game. They're playing with house money. And if it fails, oh, that's bad. Then they'll go back to being a barista or whatever it happens to be. And they don't have this long-term commitment to the company they work on. And the failure is on the upper management part, the editorial part, for allowing these people to have this much control over ultimately their futures, when they don't have any skin in the game.
Yeah, their skin in the game is very low.
The culture within Marvel is just toxic, and it's just sick. And a lot of it stems from guys like Tom Brevoort, who is just a rabid ideologue. I think that Alana Smith tweet, that's the closest thing that we have as far as evidence that there is a real and very real, very palpable blacklist at Marvel. And it's, somebody mentioned Peter, who's sort of, non-political, hasn't taken a stand either way, which a lot of people, are the same way. And it doesn't matter, it's, if you're not towing the line, and if you're not woke, and if you're not down for the struggle, quote unquote, you're an enemy. You're on the other side. So it's really this groupthink. You have to be down with the newspeak. To quote Orwell. You've got to be on their side, open and fighting alongside of them. Otherwise, you're outside. If you're not inside, you're outside. So, and it's really too bad that that's taking place, within the halls of Marvel, as far as hiring people, because it's like that article that John De La Rose did years ago, where he went and he researched all of the writers, all of the editors' Twitter feeds, and it was just rabidly anti-Christian, anti-Republican, anti-Trump. Even it's like Doug said, you could be a moderate, you could just be straight down the center, or you could be like a lot of people, you could have no opinion, and they're not going to hire you. And I just think, the EEOC, the equal employment opportunity, whatever, they exist to police against discrimination in the workforce, and it basically extends to race, sex, gender, creed, stuff like that. But it doesn't include political discrimination. And what's going on here is clear and open political discrimination. And I think it's rotten. But at the same time, thank God that we have an outlet to go around them and go straight to the customer. And that's kind of what this crowdfunded revolution within comics has shown us, is that you don't need them in order to go straight to the audience. You don't need them at all. You just have to have a great product and be really good at getting out there and promoting it.
Okay, so we do have a question from the viewers. Paula Ritchie is asking, I'm going to send this one to Perch. What are the 3 gaps or vacuums in the comic industry that indies can fill?
But Tim is going to be way better at answering this question, but I'll give you one, and then I think we can share it. More content. So kind of like we've been talking about, the big 2 in particular, the ones that dominate the shelves, they have established a very common set of comics where things feel the same. There's too much of the same kind of content out there, and people want more. And you see this in games and in books and with other things. People are desperate for other types of content, but the big 2 are publishing out a very common line. Even when they say they're doing young adult or some of these other things, it's still the same common line. So, this will sound funny, but diversity would be great in comics of content. We need more diverse content out there for people to consume, and we need better methods for people to get it. So perfect, for you guys. You guys are going to have a lot of great opinions on this, I know.
Okay, Tim, what were your thoughts?
It sounds really unobjective, but it's the first thing that came into my mind. I would say emotional investment. That, again, that's really hard to define, but it's really like, I think one thing that independent comics have been doing that's interesting to watch. So I'm going to shoot this off to Brett here in just a second, but I've been very interested in what Brian Pulido's been doing. So I saw Brian Pulido recently on Doug Ernst's stream, and I know that, Brett's worked with him, but I had never actually encountered him in any way, shape, or form. I haven't read any of his books, Evil Ernie or Lady Death, but I was listening to 2 streams he did, and I was like, I kind of like this guy because he was friendly, he was cordial. He did this stream where they were like streaming from the Lady Death headquarters, where they had a launch party for the Kickstarter, and they raised like $100,000 in 20 minutes. But it was the idea that when you broke down the numbers, the average person spent $115. The average person, like, that's crazy. And so, like, looking at the chat and looking at people's responses, it was the idea that he was able to build a brand, and he had a loyal customer base, not because that they're like an army of sycophants or whatever, but because they really liked the character of Lady Death. They were invested in her emotionally. Yes, they're like the perfect hybrid of collectors and consumers, where they want to collect this stuff and they want to read it. It's almost like I think a parallel fandom that I was talking with Matt Weldon and Bill yesterday. A parallel fandom is like the Ninja Turtles fandom. They're like the most like healthy people ever. They read the books, they collect the stuff. It's a healthy hobby to have because they feel such a deep emotional resonance with them. Me, on the other hand, for example, Doug and I share this commonality. We both like Spider-Man, but I will admit, I have lost a lot of. I know I've lost a lot of that emotional resonance, and part of it is that we are so disconnected, not only from the character but also from the writers. Because, I mean, let's say there's something in the books we don't like. So, in a healthy industry, guys like Doug and I would be able to reach out to the writers, whoever they might be, and be like, hey, the direction you're taking the character, really kind of weird and not something that we're used to. And I think a good reciprocation of that would be, hey, thank you for the input. I get a lot of messages every day. I'm going to try and do better. Or, it's the idea that they're going to try and tell us that there's going to be an open line of communication. Instead, it's like we either get blocked, we get muted, we get ignored, or at worst we get disparaged, or we get we get fans sicked on us, or whatever it might be. So there's already this emotional engagement simply because of the level of discourse that we're not allowed to have. Whereas, like, for example, in anime or manga, yes, those people are not really on social media, but their interactions tend to be pretty good. I mean, I forgot who it was. I think it's not Yusuke Murata. I think it's the guy who writes My Hero Academia. Like, he'll engage with some people on social media, and he's very polite. Most of the mangaka creators typically are. They're very good to their fans, and they're good to engage with. And you want to keep on giving them money because there's such a deep emotional connection going on there. One thing that I know, like, before Doug launched Soulfinder, I told him that the one thing that was probably going to change in his life was that as a YouTube critic, it is easy to kind of play coy or be clever or kind of do tit for tat in terms of your engagement with people. But when you start making a book, you have to engage in a level of professionalism that makes it so that your obstacle is a little bit higher, so that if you do have people trolling you, you can't hit back as hard. You have to kind of be very clever in the way you engage with people, and that's what gets people to see that you're willing to take a high road and that you can behave in a professional way. And people like that. They want to support you because they like your product, they like you as a person, and it's a perfect symbiosis of the two acting in tandem. And so I think that the gap that indie comics can fill is that level of emotional attachment. I certainly hope to have that with people who like our stuff too, and I think a lot of people are capitalizing on that in a very good way.
All right, Peter, did you have an answer for the gaps indie comics can fill?
Man, you guys really touched upon a lot of stuff. I think one of the biggest gaps we can absolutely fill is a gap that is one that is really hurting the industry right now, which is distribution. And we can't necessarily obviously set up, not at this point anyway, one giant distributor to compete with Diamond. But distribution in its essence is literally just getting product from point A to point B. So by having creators who are going into this with more of an entrepreneurial mindset, we can kind of hit up all of the gaps and the void that's there of getting comics that people want and making sure they're able to get them. Like with Alterna, we sell, it's been about a year now, we sell more directly in terms of dollars than we do through distribution. And you wouldn't really expect that to be the case. And if distribution was strong and it was a different and better system, that wouldn't be the case. Every single, I've talked about this before, but every single month we lose upwards of 600 to 800 reorders because we just don't see those purchase orders come our way. And if we don't get the purchase order, we can't ship the things out. That's a gigantic problem. That's a huge problem. So at the indie level, there's ways you can be more adaptive. You can pivot a lot easier. You can be flexible with these kinds of things. And I think now's the best time to start building up your career towards taking a hold of it and not just going, I'm a comic creator or whatever else, but going, I'm a business owner and I'm an entrepreneur and I'm going to approach the situation in that kind of way.
So that's interesting you said that, because Just Pele, he's normally he's my retail expert that's always on the Comics Aficionados. He said that you reached out to him directly and said, let's sell some comics together. And then he said he doesn't order Alterna through Diamond anymore. He only goes through your direct order program. And he says, when I get the product, it comes in this special package. I think the thing on, I put it right on my counter. And he goes, and then it's gone in a day. He goes, it's amazing. Because he's like, I wish every independent publisher would do that. It's cheaper, and it comes in better shape. And he was raving about it. So I think you're 100% there, because I think retailers have had enough of the quality that their books come in from Diamond. They're just beat the crap every time.
Yeah, speaking of problems with Diamond too, right now we've got one that I have never seen up until this month. I have the pictures on the other computer, so I can't show them. But okay, so picture a pallet of books, right? Maybe about I'd say 70 boxes or so, and the top 5 or 6 are damaged. It's pretty bad. The boxes are kind of open. There's comics spilt out, but the rest of the pallet's fine. Okay. This is the situation we had about 3 weeks ago with Diamond. I get an email from my printer, not from Diamond. My printer sends me an email and says, Diamond refused the shipment. I said, what do you mean Diamond refused the shipment? They said, the whole pallet, they're sending it back to us. So what happened? They said it's damaged. They're saying that it's damaged. We're trying to get pictures though. So this is really weird. That's never happened to us before. Whenever they've gotten things like that, it's damaged, they count them up, they let us know, okay, this needs to be replaced. We can't, obviously, because they can't sell it. That's fine. Perfectly fine, understandable. But to have them refuse an entire shipment, that was strange. So what happened is now the printer ends up getting the whole thing. You know, we saw the pictures. We're like, why didn't they just say that these boxes were split open and damaged? Let's, replace them all and send them out when we can and get those books that are there, get them processed and shipped out to stores. Now it's going to be over a month late just because Diamond refused the shipment. And then because they're over a month late, our payment, which is already on a delayed schedule anyway from Diamond, is going to be an extra 2 months till we get payment for those books. So all these kind of screw ups, it just trickles down and it hits our business. And if we didn't, I've said this before, if we did not sell direct, Alterna would not be here right now. If we relied 100% on distribution, there's no way we could do it. There's no way. We'd have to go solely into launching crowdfunders constantly. We'd have to potentially even start doing a GoFundMe just for operations costs. It's insane. That's the craziest thing, and it's not even because no one wants the books. They're ordering them. Retailers are trying to get them. Hundreds of back orders every month, getting auto canceled. You don't even see them. I see them pile up, but
this is such a common story. It's so, I mean, this happens to shops. I mean, it's part of doing business now that you're going to get damaged comics, you're getting lost comics, you're going to get stuff that's trash, you're going to go through a whole shenanigans in order to get it back. It's just normal. It's the new normal. And so I think with the folks on this channel, and then as much as we can influence and push the people doing the Indiegogos, the creators that are having great success, we have to come up with the mature, stable distribution model. It will take a while. It's going to require, I don't mean this as any kind of pointed attack on anybody, but it's going to require some egos to at least be put aside a bit so we can work together to get some of these distribution channel challenges finished. It cannot be a one-man show, or the business can't survive on that. We have to get distribution sorted out because it is awful for everybody going through this old system.
Yeah, and we're going to start working on a way to start growing some distribution in either late 2020 or early 2021, incorporating the system we're currently using, and you can sort by publisher, and we can work out terms with the publisher where we can have a consignment, or we can have it where they get paid up front for a bunch of copies, and as they sell through, we'll get some more in. Obviously, if they do consignment, they make a smaller cut. We take less risk. But if they get paid more up front, and obviously we take the risk. So it's that kind of thing where we need to start going, okay, here's the gaps, here's the spots where they can't fill. They're not doing this right, they're not doing that right. Instead of complaining about it and being frustrated about it, let's just do something about it, because we all have the ability to do something about it. And it's not going to be a previews catalog. It's not going to be a pre-ordering system. What it's going to be essentially is a reordering system. Or let's say you've got crowdfunded books. We'll get crowdfunded books into the store, and the distribution will go towards retailers and to readers. And retailers will get set up with a nice, easy discount code, and they can order directly from us and get those books, and we can just ship them out. And at that point in time, obviously, I'm going to hire help too, to fulfill that. But there's a way to do it without stepping on too many toes. It's totally stepping on toes, but it's something that needs to be done. And I'm so tired of seeing comics suffer in this way. There's no reason for it.
It does, and a lot of the gatekeeping and challenges we've talked about go away. A lot of that power goes away if you can start to fix this issue.
Well, toes need to be stepped on. So I'm sick of this.
Yeah, it's too much.
I'm old enough to remember when there was 2 distributors, and I was working at a comic book store when we would go and pick up comics at 2 different places. It was Diamond, and who was the other one?
Capital City.
Capital City, or depending where you were, there was a zoo of them.
Yeah. But we got ours from 2, and even back then, Diamond was complete shit. It was just they were the worst to deal with. Even back, this is back in the 90s. Okay,
yeah.
So I'm just so tired of this, and there's no competition here. This is a monopoly, and it's a bad monopoly. I mean, this is Ma Bell in '81 that needs to be broken up. And Diamond's biggest problem is that they're not being run by was it Josh? The son needs to take over. The old man needs to get the hell out of the way, because the kid, who's like my age, I call him a kid. He's a middle-aged man. Has some interesting ideas as far as new ways of distribution and whatnot. And I don't know what's going on there, but it's dysfunctional, and it's cumbersome. It doesn't work. It's killing the industry. It's choking. It's obviously choking off. Creating choke points for creators. So I'm interested in working with you, Peter. I'm definitely interested in any alternative outside of Diamond. I'm happy to support, because frankly, what's needed here is some healthy competition, and some creative new ways of getting books out there, and whatever I can do to participate. I'm definitely interested. So, one of the things I wanted to ask you, Peter, was have you explored Amazon and potentially opening up an Amazon store for Alterna, because my kind of view of the future is obviously direct sales off of a website, which people can order direct from, like they do with Coffin Comics, Brian Polito. But I see so many people opening up Amazon stores, these little storefronts where you either have them stock your product and they do the product fulfillment, or you do the product fulfillment yourself. And what's interesting about Amazon is that they have I think it's somewhere between a 7 to 10% return rate, whereas Barnes and Noble and bookstores have a 50% return rate. And I think that's an antiquated model. I think I think Barnes and Noble is basically lucky to even be alive right now. There was talk back in 2016 that they were basically on their last legs, and they've
been on their last legs for a while.
They have, and they've gone from being a bookstore to a music store to
coffee
a
shop.
Cafe.
It's a coffee shop. Maybe you'll buy a book. Please buy a book.
Yeah, but Amazon has retrained everyone's brain as to what to expect when it comes to product fulfillment, and they basically trained everybody to expect free 2-day shipping, which is awesome. We all love it. Now you can get same-day shipping. And they seem to be kind of the cutting edge. And it's sort of like, if you're gonna be in the game, you've got to be on Amazon. I know so many people who publish on Amazon. Guys like Kurt Schlichter, who doesn't even go through a publisher. He just writes his book, publishes it through Amazon, and he reaps all of the rewards. But I haven't explored this, and it's one of the things I've always wanted to ask you, Peter, is as far as Amazon, what are the potentials there, and have you looked into that?
Yeah, I've looked into it. We've got Amazon distributing graphic novels for us through our book distributor, but man, I want people to really look at not just depending solely on anything. We don't want to go, you took down one king and here's another king, that kind of a thing. I don't want to build up another avenue in such a huge way that we all become again solely reliant upon it. Right now is a great time to start building up your own platform, your own store. We left our Etsy store because Etsy it took out so many fees last year from us that I could have bought a car with cash. When we did Thump, we set up we sold Thump plush toys through an Etsy store, and my second bedroom became Thump Tower gift shop product fulfillment. And they do. Their fees really do add up. They index. The more business you do, it seems like it goes down, but they really wallop you in the beginning. And we sold probably 300 or 400 Thump plush toys, and we did turn a profit. It wasn't a great profit though, and a lot of that was due to shipping and handling, which is still a real pain in the ass with the USPS. In a lot of ways, even when you do those flat rate boxes and whatnot. We were doing a lot of flat rate envelopes and flat rate boxes to try and keep things simple, but it did not yield the profit that I thought it would, and it certainly it was a lot of work too, man. I mean, I would sit there and do 30 boxes a day, and it took up a lot of my time, man. I just didn't expect it to be quite that time inducive, and it was, and it's fine if it takes up that amount of time, but it's got to yield you a nice big fat profit. Otherwise, it's kind of like, what are we doing this for? So Etsy, Etsy's definitely, an interesting it's good
model.
when you're starting out, it's good. Yeah. But what it is, it's just like any other platform. Once you get to be big enough to a certain point, doing your own thing is great. But also starting to do your own thing from the beginning is something that everybody should be talking about and doing, because you don't want to become too reliant on a certain platform, and then when it's all of a sudden, whether it goes under, I know everyone thinks, okay, there's no way ever Amazon will go under, none at all, but everyone thought that way about everything else that ever went under.
Amazon's like a business like any other business. It's going to come and go, and one day there's going to be a new Amazon. There's going to be something that comes in and gives it a real run for its money and pretty much just crushes it. That's just the nature. That's just
so have it be a part having to be a part of a strategy is good, but again,
You
solely
can't-
relying on things like fulfillment, it's not a way to go.
You can't outsource your business sins, and that's what a lot of people have got us into this. They've gone to, this is how Diamond took a lot of control. They outsourced their business and marketing sins to somebody else. So Amazon is a great vending place. It's a great one channel, but you have to know your business. If you know your business, you'll stay in power. If you don't, you're giving that knowledge to somebody else.
Well, and again, this is Brian Polito. Brian, I think at one point in time when he was first starting out, 18 crowdfunds ago, 18 campaigns ago, he was doing product fulfillment through a product fulfillment service. And now he's built it up to the point where he's got his own warehouse. He's got his own staff where they are stocking everything and, mailing it out. He posts these great pictures, kind of like Peter does, of his car just loaded, just chock full of boxes, go to the post office, everybody, and I love that stuff, man. Brian goes to the printer and he does these great videos, and it shows the comics getting printed and going through the press. And, it really reminds me of the 90s when I first started out at Chaos Comics, where we had this little office building up in Scottsdale Air Park, and Jason Jensen and I were sitting in the back of an unair conditioned warehouse coloring and running marker paper through an old Xerox machine. And then, in back of us was 4 or 5 guys who were packing boxes and loading them onto RPS and FedEx and UPS. And, it's kind of gone back to that. And Brian said something in that stream with Doug Tenaple a couple weeks ago, which was a great stream. And I encourage everybody to go and watch that, because you're looking at 2 guys who have, a lot of experience in creating graphics and graphic novels and comics, and also 2 guys that have well-established IPs. And he said, it's fine to be able to use, a product fulfillment company, but he said at the end of the day, nobody's going to care about your product more than you. So, bringing that in-house makes perfect sense. You not only control the shipping, you're controlling as much as you can, because there's so much that's out of your control. So it's kind of like, what we can control, let's make an effort to do so. And that's basically what he's done. He's brought it all in-house. I'm sure he's cut his costs like crazy, but at the same time, he's got to go out and hire employees and pay salaries and pay healthcare and all that fun stuff. However, the benefit is that he's in control, and he's not leaving his destiny up to other people and trusting that they're going to care as much as he does, because anybody that's ever been in business for themselves knows that nobody will care as much as you care. Nobody.
All right, so I think we're coming to the end of the stream. It's almost 1 a.m. here. I want to thank everybody very much, especially David. People don't know this, but I had some technical issues here, and my Streamlabs wasn't working, and he's actually running the stream from his computer, and I very much appreciate it and getting it on the channel and everything. So before we go, I want to let everyone have a chance to talk about what projects maybe you've worked on, what you've got down the pike. I know Peter has Alterna right now, and then we'll sign off. And I'm also going to send some stuff out on social media about you guys. But so, David, thank you very much. Where can people find you? What have you done?
So you can find me at davidvstewart.com or dvspress.com, which will have links to everything, including my music. So just a quick little promo: if you join my mailing list, dvspress.com/list, you will get the ebook of this for free. It looks mirrored on my screen. It's called Water of Awakening. It's a high fantasy epic here. My experiments this year, which you can check out on Amazon, they're 99 cents for the ebooks, or you can get these cute little paperbacks I do everything in paperback. Voices of the Void. This is sci-fi horror. I call this like Aliens meets Lovecraft. So if you like aliens or you like bug hunts, but you also want Lovecraftian psychic horror, this is a cool book. Chronocyte, this is a high fantasy book. These are both 2-hour reads. I designed these books as an experiment. See if people would be interested in reading books that were specifically designed to last a certain amount of time, which is the same as a movie, 2 hours. So if you're wanting to read a book and be done with it in a night, both of these are pretty cool. the 99 cents for the ebooks, and the paperbacks vary. This paperback's cheaper because it's Amazon only. This one's a little more expensive because you can get it everywhere. These are all print-on-demand books, by the way, so this is what's kind of cool. Needle Ash, this is a newer one. If you guys like manga or you like samurai stuff, Muramasa Blood Drinker, this is the first edition cover. I might bring this one back, actually, because I think people like this red and white. It's just very striking. Anyway, this one has lots of sword fights and fun stuff like that in it if you're into like Sengoku period Japanese historical fiction, but this one also has magic in it, so it's a little bit fantasy as well. And then, of course, you can buy the album. This is at zulonline.com or zulonline.bandcamp.com, ZUL, if you can't read that backwards. This is like some instrumental ambient rock stuff that I put out the other year, and occasionally I do put out albums still. The guitars are not just for show. I actually do use them. So that's pretty much what I've got going on. You can find my YouTube channel, youtube.com/rpmfidel. That is where I talk about a bunch of different stuff. Sometimes comics, a lot of times movies, mostly books, because that's what I do. I write books, and so that's what I do. And I'm happy to run the stream on this end. So
what kind of amp do you have behind you?
That's a Mesa Boogie. That's an old dual rectifier.
Cool.
That's one of the old ones. So the new ones are cool. You can turn on different levels. But
is that a tube or is that solid state?
Oh, it's all tube. That's one of the.
Is it?
Yeah, it's an old one. The cab is actually a Carvin Legacy cab, but it has vintage 30s in it. I actually like it better than my Mesa Boogie cabs. I've got more amps than that. They're just not in this room. My room's super messy right now, but like there's my drum set. There's some more guitars. I was a professional musician for like over a decade, and I kind of gave that up. I'm like, there's no money in music. I'm going to write novels. But it's fun. It's a fun thing. And so I love doing my experiments, and you can check out some of those on. And I have more books than that too. Those are just the ones that were near me, and I do always have like a couple free ones, like Garamesh and the Farmer's a little kid's fairy tale. I don't know where I put that one. It's fun. You can read that one to your kids too.
Awesome. Like I said, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on.
Next up, Perch. You were my co-host today. You helped me out with a couple spots with getting some good direct questions and getting some great information out there. Where can people find you and follow you?
Yeah, just real quickly. I mean, the spotlight should be on the other guests here, but I do have a YouTube channel. It's got terrible audio quality, but lots of topics like we're talking about here today. So if you're interested in business publishing, that's what I go into primarily. Not drama. Lots of other channels cover that. So it's mainly what's going on. And we'd love to have you over there. Recommend a friend. I'm on Twitter at Comic Perch, probably too much, so you can throw it out over there. And I'd say just at the end, as a one last plea, just keep helping us work together, get a better distribution channel. I can't stress that enough. We've got to find more ways to get comics into the hands of people. And as a retailer, people running shops understand, outside of a 5% of weirdos who want to get into the industry themselves and will deny things on ideological reasons, most shop owners are just desperately trying to make rent every month. So making it easy for them to get their comics in their hands and order and know that you're out there or do signings, that's what they need. They need ease. And it sounds ridiculous that a business owner shouldn't take more of their time and more of their hours to actually research and do this stuff. But there aren't hours in the day. Unfortunately, that's where it's at. So make it easy for them, and they will order and carry your books, 95% of them. And that's what we want. That's what we need. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. So next up, I think I've told most people this. When I started out my channel, I contacted a couple of people for some advice. Doug Ernst was the only guy that came back with me with details and said, hey, this is what you're going to need to do. I can't wait to see what you've done. He's been very supportive the whole way. I'm here, semi-successful YouTube channel, basically because, well, in large part because of the help he's given me. So, Doug, thank you very much for joining me, joining us. And where can people find you, and what are you up to?
Yeah, well, first off, again, I want to say congratulations to your channel, especially you've done this after the adpocalypse and the algorithm change actually during Captain Marvel and all that sort of stuff. So to reach 1,000 subscriber milestone right now is pretty cool, and I can't wait to see what you do in the future. So I have a YouTube channel. Obviously, it's just Douglas Ernst. If people want to find me on Twitter, it's Douglas Ernst. There's all the Captain Marvel people are still at it as we speak. So if they want to psychological study, they could go on Twitter. I have a blog. I cross-post my stuff on, it's douglasernst.blog. I'm on BitChute, same thing, Douglas Ernst. And then obviously, I just finished up my campaign on Soulfinder Demons Match. My project, obviously, with art by Timothy Lim, color work by Brett R. Smith, covers by Dave Dorman, and additional artwork by Matt Weldon. So I guess since they're here both together, thanks to both of you guys, this project would not exist without the two of you. Tim, you introduced me to Brett, you introduced me to Matt, you introduced me to Dave Dorman. So this whole community, this whole network helps each other, and that's one of the things I like about it. So again, thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Like I said, thank you very much, Doug. Next, Brett, you are a multi-decade veteran of the comic industry. You've worked at DC, Marvel. You have so much experience. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. This is the second time. I know you're very busy. I know you have so many projects you're working on. Couldn't be more happy to have you on this time. Sorry you got in a little bit late. I guess I messed up with the communications on when the
No, you didn't mess up with the communications. I read it wrong. I'm so used to streaming in the evenings. I saw 10 Eastern. I thought, oh, it must be 10 p.m. Eastern, which makes it 7 p.m. my time. I can do that. I had no idea that it was in the morning. So I'm the doofus who screwed up the timeline. So I apologize. Thank you for being patient. Thank everybody here. Thanks for hanging out and waiting for me to show up. I promise I'll be on time next time. I will make sure that I got the time zone correct. 7 a.m. 7 a.m. So anyway, people can find me at brs76.com. That's my website, or colorfusioninc.com. You can catch me on Twitter at Brett R. Smith 76. Let's see. I am working on Soulfinder, coloring that, and that's going really well. It's so much fun to be working with Tim, and it's just an honor and a pleasure to work with Doug, especially considering this is his first book. I just wrapped up a 98-page graphic novel called Blood. That is in a bidding war right now between two publishers. That should come out in October. And that's with Chuck Dixon. It's a werewolf Western, and it's going to be shot for live action movie early this year. And I'm also prepping 2 new crowdfunds as we speak, one of which is gonna be a big one. It's with a really, really big Twitter and right of center media personality. And the other one is an adaptation of a national bestseller. So those will be coming in, those campaigns will be dropping in the coming months, and we'll be teasing some artwork. And just working on some other stuff too, working on, trying to get some other adaptations and projects in the pipeline, things I've been working on for, almost years now. But, and also trying to find some alternative ways to finance new books outside of crowdfunding. And I'm putting together a group of investors who are some pretty heavy hitters who are interested in, taking existing properties, which are best-selling books, and adapting them into graphic novels, and then, pushing to get them adapted into live action. So those are the things I'm working on. And, then also doing, I'm doing a new cover for John De La Rose for Flying Sparks 3. Gonna be working on that today. So I've been tardy on that one. So just juggling a lot of stuff, but it's all really good stuff. It's all exciting stuff. And, the more I do this stuff, I think to myself, we've got to find new ways of distribution, because there's just too much stuff coming out. All of us have way too much content that we're all creating, and, which is wonderful. We're solving that problem. We're solving that problem as far as content, filling that vacuum. It's finding ways of getting it to the customer. And I think, it's great to be a part of this group and this community with people like Peter, who are out there, the tip of the spear. I really look at Brian and Polito, and I look at Peter as two people who are really trying to solve problems and doing it in a really creative and interesting way. And it's great to be a part of this community and get to know you guys, because I think that to a large degree, we are the future of this medium. it's not this corporatized, model that Marvel and DC is basically running and is failing. The future of this medium is with all of us, and it's a very bright future.
Couldn't have said it better, my friend.
Oh, and congratulations on 1,000 subs. Good for you. And that is quite a feat, like Doug said, in the midst of the algorithm change and the apocalypse. So well done, and happy to be here. And anytime. So just hit me up next time, Wes, and awesome. I'll be here. Yes,
I think we'll be doing more of those. What did we call it last time? A comic industry roundtable. But those are future events, though. We'll definitely be in touch. All right, next up we got Peter Simeti. If you all don't know this, Alterna Comics is absolutely my favorite comic book publisher in the industry today. I have every Alterna comic that's been published, I think, in the last 15 months. My comic shop is in Manila. It's not all that close to me. They have to special order all the comics for me and deliver them. So they have a long road to get here. And I treasure every one of them. Like I said, I share them with my son. It's one of the things that we do together. So Alterna Comics has a very special place in my heart. And I couldn't believe Peter Simeti joined me, the owner and publisher of Alterna. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, man. Jeez, I didn't know all that. Boy, oh boy. Oh, I'm glad you didn't tell me that in the beginning. I would have been really intimidated. But thanks, I appreciate it. It's been great being on here, talking comics with all you guys, especially so much of the business that unfortunately we don't all get to talk about and see being talked about because there's so much other nonsense going on. But right now, we've got something really fun at Alterna that's happening. We've got Alternaween 2 Newsprint's Revenge going on. And if you didn't participate in Alternaween last year, that's okay. You can get on it this year. 15,000 comics last year were used as trick-or-treats. And it was great because a bunch of kids got comics on Halloween. And even more of those kids, they got comics for the first time. And that was such an awesome thing, seeing all the pictures. Perch mentioned pictures that he had taken last year as well of kids reading comics, and what goes better with your Halloween candy than a fun comic book. So if you want to support this year, you can do so. We've got 15 days left. It's at $3,316 raised, 66% of the goal, 92 backers on board. And we've got all kinds of things on here too. Even if you don't necessarily have a lot of trick-or-treaters, you can always get some Alterna merch. We've got hats and beanies and shirts. We've got an exclusive Alterna Comics calendar that you can only get during this campaign. This is also going to be comic book sized and printed on newsprint. We've got a trick-or-treater bundle here that comes with Silly Putty on top of it. It's actually a new Silly Putty egg, a tote bag, a random kid-friendly comic, an Alterna calendar, and I support my local comic shop sticker, and 2 pins. And that's just $10 if you're in the US. All of these perks ship for free. Shipping is included already, so it's not an additional charge. And another thing that's great too is that we're going to be giving back to our local communities with this campaign. So every $1,000 raised past our goal, we're going to donate a box of 100 comics to various children's hospitals. Last year, we donated something like, I think it was like close to 800 or 1,000 comics to various children's hospitals. It was great because of this. There's those kids that can't get out for Halloween to do trick or treating at that point in time, and to bring Halloween, to bring trick or treating to them, and put a smile on their face while they're going through a lot is really important. So you get to do a lot of good with this campaign. We try to make a fun event out of it, and a lot of the money also goes towards us having expanded distribution. So I talked about having books into sheets earlier in the program here, and this is a tweet that they had put out, and it's because of Alternaween last year enabling us to expand our distribution, to talk to book buyers, to product sellers. And we got a membership at a site called rangeme.com, and that connects you with various buyers at all kinds of companies. So Alternaween did a lot of good last year. It didn't just get comics out there to kids. It also enabled us to put us in the position to get something like this going that gets comics in front of even more people. So this is just, it's a fun campaign. It's the core of it is all about getting comics out there, and I hope you guys give it a look. And if it's interesting to you, make sure to back it. So thank you guys, and seriously, thank you all for the conversation today. It was great.
Yep, that was awesome. So last but not least, Donald Thump himself, Tim Lim. Thank you very much for joining us. If you don't know, some of you probably figured this out by now, but my wife is Pinay, and Mr. Lim is one of the few people that'll talk to me but in Tagalog on Twitter. I very much appreciate that. Hopefully we'll see you one day when you come here and visit these beautiful islands. What are you doing on, where can people follow you, Tim?
Salamat po sa lahat ng tao nag-listen today. But anyway, so you can find me on Twitter at POTUSTHUMP. That's POTUSTHUMP. You'll see a little bit of politics, a lot of memes, and a lot of art too. I try to be pretty friendly to everyone, so don't be too scared if you're not a conservative. That's fine. I try to actually post memes I think people would find pretty funny. For any of the books that we've done, I mean, they're all over the place. Go to Amazon, go to Antarctic Press, go on eBay. They're spread out and about. I wrapped up art on Soulfinder before the launch of the campaign. So now B.Smith is delivering the pages and I'm lettering them as I go. I want to talk about this real quick, but I was talking to Doug and I was laughing about it because when we launched the campaign, we didn't have much colored work already in the bag. So what we did was we took whatever panels we had, and because Brett works at a TIFF resolution size for his files, when they're blown up, they're pretty much the same quality as like a full page. And so like readers or people who have backed the campaign have basically only seen 2% of the finished art. And I am resisting having to show pages because the colors are so good. I'm having a ball lettering this. And so if you are listening and you back that campaign, I will just say right here that you will not be disappointed. And I know there's a little bit of bias because I worked on it, but everything is just coming together so well that there's just no way I can be more pleased. And I know I think Doug has probably less self-control than I do in this regard because he posted a lettered page up the other day and I'm like, Doug, what are you doing?
I couldn't help it.
It's gotta be a secret. And it happened to be a page where I had to do edits on the text too, and someone called it out. They're like, lettering is bad. I was like, aww. So anyway, I am having a blast. And so as Brett delivers pages, I follow up with the letters. I am caught up. I saw that he tried to pull a fast one on me because he put in 2 new pages last night, but I caught them too. So we know what we're going to be doing today. I have a crowdfunding campaign coming next week that I'm very excited about. It's myself, Mark Pellegrini, my co-writer, and Matt Weldon. We have teamed up for the return of Black Ops. So Black Ops 2 comes out next week. It's the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we've announced. We actually have 6 artists working on the book. The other 3 have not been announced yet, and I've kept that pretty close to the chest. I am the type of person who I don't like revealing everything until the end. So I always wait until I see the whites of the eyes before I do anything. That's just how I've run every single campaign I've done. So we hope that everyone sticks around for Friday of next week at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. That is when we launch Black Ops 2. It is the first project I'm doing in conjunction with Iconic Comics, which is run by a friend of mine, Johnny Wong, who also runs Bell County Comic Con, and is actually a backup turtle for Vanilla Ice. That's a fun piece of information. But Iconic Comics should be a really fun venture. I do not get a dime for promoting them. I'm only helping with logistics. What he wants to do with the property is he wants to have it be a source for printing and fulfillment for crowdfunded books in the future. So going into 2020, he's actually going to be accepting submissions to go under the Iconic Comics brand and imprint. So that'll be cool. Not only will you get printing and fulfillment, we'll also help with the marketing, and you'll also be able to say that you were published by a company, which is going to be pretty neat. So we're very excited about it. Next year, we have 3 IPs that are going to be going out besides Black Ops. You also have Walmart, and then you have our new property, which is Common America, which is a brand new IP that is not political at all. So basically, the only political book we have is Walmart going forward. But I'm really excited. I'm so glad that you made it to 1,000 subs, because that's an accomplishment in and of itself. And I'm so happy to be surrounded by a good group of people.
Awesome. Well, thank you all very much. Like I said, thank you so much to the whole panel. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. And this isn't it. I got a comics aficionados with all my normal peckerheads joining me right here tomorrow. So if you want to join us, we're going to talk about comics. And thank you all very much. I think that's about wraps it up. I think all I have to do is hit the stop streaming button, right, Dave?
Yeah, I should be able to hit stop streaming, and then it'll be done.
All right, I'm doing it. Can I dance?